Chapter 1266. My heart really can't take it anymore. The faces of those who were previously defeated by Zhongxian turned red. While their strength couldn't be compared with conquerors of 10, they were still figures who had braved through many battles, and their fighting prowess were superior to ordinary cultivators. Yet, the other party was still able to defeat them consecutively and yet still have the energy to put on an act. Where were they supposed to put their pride and dignity now? But thinking about it, there were indeed such people in this world. For one, Hongyang definitely had the strength to defeat all 10 of them twice each without getting exhausted at all. Could the person whom they had fought with earlier possess such strength as well? Everyone turned their gazes over to Zhongxian, wanting to see if what Hongyang had said was true. But what they found themselves faced with were a pair of hollow eyes, a weakly trembling body, and a face which suggested that the young man was going to lose consciousness at any moment soon. I don't have such strength. Zhongxian shook his head weakly. I can hardly remain standing at the moment. How am I to fight with you? He was currently in the ring of death of the black market, where schemes and deception were a huge taboo. If he were to admit that he had been putting on an act previously, he could very well bring great trouble upon himself. You don't have a say in this matter. I, Hongyang, will fight anyone I want. No one can sway my decision, Hongyang declared with compelling authority as he took a step forward. Boom! A powerful surge of zhenqi suddenly permeated the entire ring, exerting immense pressure on Zhongxian. It carried a threatening intent behind it, as if saying that regardless Zhongxian liked it or not, this was a battle he wouldn't be able to escape from. You're too much. Zhongxian stiffened his neck in indignation. I'm too much. Hongyang mocked before shaking his head. Make your move. I suggest that you go all out, or else there's no way you will be stepping out of this ring alive. After which, Hongyang raised his hand, and a bundle of zhenqi began gathering furiously above his palm. Given how bent Hongyang is on fighting against that newcomer, a battle should be inevitable. Who do you think will win? Do you even need to ask? It's obvious it's Hongyang. I shall stake everything on him. I'm also going to stake on Hongyang as well. His battle style is exceptionally brutal, and he would even rip a live person into shreds callously. Even if that newcomer was putting on an act before, he still won't be able to avoid the fate of being torn in two. More like torn in 4. Well, no matter how many pieces he is torn into, there's no doubt that the newcomer dead meat. Upon hearing Hongyang's words, the faces of the spectators flushed crimson in excitement. Time to place my bet. Amidst the crowd, Zhong Zhouxiao also had his fists clenched tightly in agitation as well. In the earlier few rounds, the highest payout had only been a little more than 1:2, but owing to Hongyang's fearsome reputation, the payout should be able to rise to whole new heights this round. Zhong Zhouxiao walked over to the betting table, and as he had expected, the payout for Zhongxian's victory had already increased beyond 110. In other words, nearly every single person here had betted on Hongyang's victory. No one thought that Zhongxian would be able to emerge victorious in the duel. We have really struck it rich this time. With hands trembling uncontrollably in excitement and delight, Zhong Zhouxiao passed a storage ring over. I'll bet 1800 concentrated high-tier spirit stones on Zhongxian's victory. You are going to bet on Zhongxian? The staff in charge of managing the bets asked in disbelief. Shaking his head, he quickly processed Zhong Zhouxiao's bet. If no one were to bet on Zhongxian, how would their black market earn money? Without a doubt, that fellow was bound to lose his 1800 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. While the spectators were excitedly making their bets on the ring, Hongyang looked at the young man before him and said, "Make your move. Why don't we just forget it? I won't be a match for you anyway." Zhongxian shook his head. Like I said, you don't have a say in this matter. Seeing that the young man was still rejecting him, Hongyang couldn't be bothered to waste his words anymore. Hula! With a cold sneer, Hongyang charged forward with astounding momentum. In just an instant, he was already right before Zhongxian. His stature was truly towering. Standing next to him, Zhongxian appeared to be nothing more than a child. Without any hesitation, Hongyang smashed his fist down toward Zhongxian, and a ferocious gale whipped up in the surroundings. A slight rumbling sound reminiscent of thunder could be heard in the air, hinting at the immense might that was packed behind that punch. From the looks of it, if that punch were to land, there was no doubt that Zhong Xian would be reduced into meat paste. On the other hand, seeing how Hong Yang didn't even hesitate before making his move, Zhong Xian felt deeply exasperated. As expected of one who had undergone multiple life-and-death battles, Hong Yang's instincts were truly keen. Zhong Xian was confident in his disguise, and the fact that the crowd was only slightly doubtful of his strength even after he had won round after round bore testimony to how lifelike his disguise was. Yet, Hong Yang was still able to see right through him, remaining firmly convinced that he was putting on a disguise no matter how he protested. Without a doubt, Hong Yang was a formidable figure. Forget it. Feeling the immense might crushing down on him, Zhong Xian knew that there was no avoiding this battle anymore. Sighing deeply, he took a step to the side. Voila! It was just a small step, but it allowed Zhong Xian to narrowly avoid the other party's downward punch. Hong Yang redirected the lingering strength behind his smashing punch into a sideward hook, adamantly tracing Zhong Xian's figure with his offense. What a swift transformation! Zhong Xian was astonished. Had it been any other opponent, his infinitesimal maneuver method of dodging would have surely caused the other party's attack to fall empty. Yet, Hong Yang's reflexes and flexibility were so powerful that he could actually change his movements at a whim fluidly, as if he had planned it right from the start. Even Hall Master Xing might not be capable of pulling off something like that. He can almost catch up with a third of me. Incredible. Surprised, Zhong Xian did a rough mental calculation. It was already extremely formidable for a challenger of an underground ring to be able to match a third of his reflexes and speed. Knowing that it would be hard for him to avoid Hong Yang's sideward hook, Zhong Xian exhaled deeply and pushed his chest inward, making himself as thin as the width of a fist. This was a unique battle technique that was used to avoid close-quarter attacks. Even an ordinary human would be able to push their chest in significantly by exhaling deeply, let alone a cultivator. By withdrawing his zhengqi into his dantian and using the surrounding air to compress his chest, it was possible for a cultivator to reduce his size significantly. In a battle between experts, even the smallest difference in the distance could cause a vast difference in the outcome. Through using this move, Zhong Xian successfully dodged Hong Yang's sideward hook. However, Hong Yang's offense didn't stop just there. He immediately changed his punch into a palm to strike down on Zhong Xian. In the first place, his hand was already extremely close to Zhong Xian's chest. If Zhong Xian were to be struck by that palm strike, his heart could very well be pierced through, resulting in instantaneous death. Just as everyone thought that there was no way Zhong Xian could possibly dodge this move, perhaps it was out of resignation or exhaustion, Zhong Xian's caved-in chest abruptly bounced back up. As if an inflated ball, it coincidentally collided with Hong Yang's approaching palm and successfully deflected it aside. Following which, Zhong Xian stepped forward and raised his hand, preparing to strike Hong Yang's face. It was the same move he had used to subdue his previous opponent. Achem! Not expecting that Zhong Xian would be able to launch a counterattack despite his relentless assault, Hong Yang's eyes narrowed his eyes in surprise. Even though his earlier assault may appear to be simple on the exterior, it was actually his famed triple chain assault. This was the technique he had used to down countless tough opponents, and even conquerors of 10 hadn't been able to survive the second strike of his triple chain assault. Yet, not only did the young man successfully dodge all three maneuvers, he even managed to launch a counterattack. Just like what he had guessed before, the young man was indeed no ordinary opponent. In this moment, Hong Yang couldn't help but feel deeply excited within. He swiftly raised his other hand, wanting to fend off the young man's slap. But contrary to his expectations, the young man right before him shot him a peculiar smile instead. All of a sudden, Hong Yang felt a bout of dizziness assaulting his head, and his body staggered backward weakly. Crap, it's a terpsichorean art. Hong Yang's widened his eyes in astonishment. That other party's smile was actually one of the famed techniques of terpsichores, 100 flowers bloom. It was said that the person who had created this technique was an incredible beauty amongst the terpsichores more than 10,000 years ago. Just a returning smile of hers could send one's heart throbbing uncontrollably, and in that instant, it would be as if the rest of the world had turned colorless. Those who had fallen for the technique would find themselves consumed in a trance, thus losing their fighting prowess. But wasn't this a technique which only women could use? How could a man like Zhong Xian use it as well, and to look so moving on top of that? Feeling that his mind was swiftly descending into confusion, Hong Yang hurriedly bit his tongue to restore some rationality back into his head. However, it was already too late. Zhong Xian's slap was already right before his eyes. For some reason, those 5 fingers felt like towering mountains to Hong Yang. He felt that he would never be able to avoid the slap no matter how he struggled. Pa. A resounding pa echoed on the ring, and a palm was clearly imprinted on Hong Yang's swollen face. You. Feeling the stinging pain on his face, Hong Yang felt so frenzied that he could lose his mind at this very instant. He was the conqueror of 100 of the underground black market, but he ended up being slapped in the ring so easily. This was a huge humiliation to him. I'll rip you into shreds. Roaring furiously, Hong Yang was just about to make his move when the young man abruptly retreated 8 steps backward. As if he had depleted all of his strength, the young man's body trembled uncontrollably, and it looked as if he would collapse onto the ground at any moment. I told you that I have already come to the limit of my body, and I won't be able to fight with you anymore. Let's just forget it. I really am not a match for you. You. Hong Yang felt as if his mind was about to explode. Right after literally giving me a tight slap in my face, you want to call the duel off and retreat unscathed? How can there be something that convenient in the world? Furthermore, you aren't a match for me. If you still aren't a match for me after nearly crippling me, if you were really a match for me, wouldn't I be killed in an instant? Boom. Unable to hold back his rage, Hong Yang dashed forward furiously for Zhong Xian. This time, he decided to go all out. He adept weaved his zhunqi with his fingers, crafting a massive cage around them. Hong Yang is getting serious. Once he gets serious, there's bound to be a cold corpse lying in his wake. It was just a lucky slap earlier. That fellow can't possibly be so lucky the next time around too. A commotion broke out on the spectator stand. Earlier, when Hong Yang was slapped by the newcomer, everyone was stunned for an instant, causing the spectator stand to fall deathly silent. However, seeing that Hong Yang had flown into a rage, excited cheerings began resounding once more. Hula! A might which seemed to harness sufficient strength to sway even the heavens themselves gathered in Hong Yang's palm as he callously thrust it toward Zhong Xian. As a person who had been crowned as the conqueror of 100 in the Ring of Death, his fighting prowess was truly not one to be underestimated. Facing the other party's attack, Zhong Xian took a step back before twisting his body, nimbly dodging Hong Yang's powerful palm strike. After which, he raised his palm once more. It was the exact same movement as before. He was preparing to send another slap toward Hong Yang's face. You want to use the same move against me twice? Dream on. Seeing that it was the same old move, Hong Yang was suddenly reminded of the previous insult he had suffered. He bellowed furiously as he sent another palm strike to meet the young man's slap. But just as their palms were about to collide with one another, the young man before him suddenly sent him another bewitching smile. This smile was even more radiant than the one before. In an instant, Hong Yang felt the sight before him blurring as another bout of dizziness assaulted his head. The palm strike he had pushed forward in order to fend off Zhong Xian's slap also came to an abrupt halt, freezing in midair. Pada! Another burst of fiery pain stung Hong Yang's face as his body revolved twice on the spot from the sheer might behind the slap. Aha! Awakening from his trance, Hong Yang clutched his hair in fury. With a furious roar, he was just about to dash forward to return the favor to the young man when the latter's helpless voice suddenly sounded once more. Like I said, my body has really reached its limit. I am in no state to fight with you. Why won't you just listen to my words? I honestly don't want to fight with you. I really am no match for you. Your body has reached its limit. You are no match for me. Hong Yang touched the 2 swollen palm print on his cheeks, and his head nearly exploded. You call this reaching your limit? Doesn't that mean that if you haven't reached your limit, I would have already been killed by you? Can you just stop humble bragging? My heart really can't take it anymore. Chapter 1267. A shocking bee. In a vast room in the underground black market. An elder anxiously barged into the room, exclaiming, "Boss, bad news. What's wrong?" Seated at the very center of the room, a middle-aged man was leisurely sipping on his tea when he heard the exclamation and frowned. This middle-aged man was a leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle expert, as well as the person who rules over the entire black market. Very few people knew of his true name, so most would only deferentially refer to him as the boss. Invaluable treasures could be found at every turn in the black market, but very few dared to snatch those treasures for their own. A huge reason for this was out of fear and deference for the boss and his vicious means. Earlier, a challenger known as Zhong Xian arrived in the Ring of Death, and he won 10 rounds consecutively, winning himself the title of the Conqueror of 10. The elder reported, "Is this anything to make a fuss about? Winning 10 rounds consecutively isn't anything much, is it?" The boss replied leisurely as he lifted the teapot and poured himself another cup of tea. It wasn't easy to rise to the position of Conqueror of 10, but every single year, there would still be 7 to 8 who would be crowned as one. In view of that, it really wasn't anything much to make a fuss over. That would be nothing much, but just as he was about to challenge the other Conquerors of 10 for the position of Conqueror of 100, Hong Yang suddenly stepped into the ring. The elder continued. "Oh." The boss smiled in interest. Given Hong Yang's strength, there is none in his cultivation realm who would be a match for him. Anyone who faces him is likely to end in death. Since that's the case, just make preparations to dispose of the corpse then. You have done this for a few years now, so is there any need to trouble me for something as trivial as this? But boss. I initially thought that there would be no problems as well, but after both parties traded 2 blows. Hong Yang ended up being slapped twice whereas Zhong Xian is still completely unscathed. The elder swiftly explained the situation he had seen earlier, and the disbelief in his tone showed that he still hadn't been able to come to terms with the matter yet. Hong Yang was slapped. Are you saying that Hong Yang isn't a match for Zhong Xian? The boss was taken aback. I'm afraid that's likely to be the case. The elder nodded. Hong Yang is our money tree, and he has been known for his indomitable strength. While he has a resounding reputation himself, there hasn't been any good opponent to pit against him to create some fanfare for the Ring of Death. This works fine too. With this defeat, he should be able to grow further. We can plan for his comeback and earn substantial profits from it. Keep a close look on the situation, and make sure that his life isn't threatened. The boss placed his teacup back on the table and said contemplatively. Hong Yang was formidable, not infallible. Anything could happen on the ring, and it was precisely this trait of the Ring of Death that allowed it to draw a steady stream of customers. As long as Hong Yang didn't die, his defeat wouldn't be a problem. I understand. However, there's another problem. Zhong Xian came to the ring together with a companion, and the latter has been betting all in on him every single round. Over the past 10 matches, he has already won more than 1,600 concentrated high-tier spirit stones from us. When Hong Yang came on the stage, I thought that Zhong Xian would surely be defeated in the duel, so I altered the payout to be very low on Hong Yang's side and very high on Zhong Xian's side, wanting to lure that companion of his to go all in once more to recoup our losses. I didn't think that Zhong Xian would actually outmatch Hong Yang. An awkward look surfaced on the elder's face. Very high. How high is that? The boss was startled. If Hong Yang were to lose, even the overall profits of the black market which we have accumulated over many years won't be enough to compensate the other party. What did you say? Hearing those words, the cup in the boss' hand fell to the ground and shattered into innumerable fragments. Just how high of a payout did that fellow set for Zhong Xian? Bring me over to take a look. I want to see the situation with my own eyes. Unable to remain still any longer, the boss stood up and began making his way over to the ring. In the Ring of Death, the death of an individual or two wouldn't mean anything at all. However, if they were to bankrupt themselves over a bet, how were they supposed to continue operating their business? Such a thing must be prevented at all cost. You bastard, I'll tear you apart. On the ring, after being slapped 2 consecutive times, Hong Yang's eyes had already reddened in utter rage. Prior to challenging Zhong Xian, he had already known the young man was no weakling. However, he hadn't thought that the young man would actually be so powerful. It had been nearly 10 years since he first fought in the Ring of Death, and never had he suffered such humiliation before. More importantly, even after managing to land 2 clean blows on him, That fellow was still adamantly continuing with his act, making it look as if he would collapse at any moment. Act your head. If anyone is going to collapse here, it should be me. But even though Hong Yang was livid with rage, he knew better than to let his anger blind his rationality. I have to steady my primordial spirit. With this thought in mind, he sealed all of his acupoints and steadied his state of mind so that the young man couldn't sway him anymore. The reason why the young man had managed to land 2 slaps on him was because of his terpsichorean art. As long as he were to avert his eyes and attention away from it, he would be able to avoid falling into a trance. Hong Long. After putting up his mental guard, Hong Yang charged forward once more. This time, he was planning to get into close quarters to launch a barrage of attacks. His towering stature had granted him with strength superior to that of his peers, and he knew that the best way for him to capitalize on this strength was through close-quarter combat. The young man was swift and nimble, but in close-quarter combat, one would often be limited by their reaction speed, thus making it nigh impossible to dodge every single attack. This would be his best shot at exacting vengeance. Hoo-la! Charging forward, his arms and legs flew forth one after another with astounding speed, reminiscent of a relentless storm battering down on the world. In comparison, Zhongxian seemed like a fragile raft, completely helpless in its face. Not bad. Zhongxian muttered beneath his breath. In this moment, Zhongxian's body was still limp in weakness, and it felt as if he would be swallowed by that storm of attacks. But for some bizarre reason, despite his sluggish movement, Hong Yang's barrage of attacks still missed him one after another, as if Hong Yang was intentionally letting him off. He's able to predict my attacks. Hong Yang widened his eyes in disbelief. Despite the young man's slow and sluggish movements, it was apparent to him that the young man had seen right through every single one of his attack trajectory, dodging all of his attacks in advance. The young man's movements may seem unseemly, but there was not a single wasted movement at all. Just as Hong Yang was thinking of another plan to subdue the young man before him, the latter abruptly raised his palm once more, clearly preparing to imprint another palm on his face. Again. I have already steadied my primordial spirit. Your terpsichorean arts won't work on me anymore. Hong Yang sneered confidently. However, in the next moment, he heard a voice sounding in his ear, "Don't bother dodging. It's futile." It sounded like the whisperings of a lover, causing a jolt of electricity to course through his body. In an instant, the tension in his muscles loosened, causing his body to fall limp. Shit, it's demonic tune this time around. It took only a tenth of a second for Hong Yang to realize the anomaly in his body, and he immediately bit his tongue to jolt himself out of his abnormal state. But by the time he was about to protect himself, the young man's palm had already appeared by his face once more. Pa! A crisp and resounding echo it was. Hong Yang's eyes reddened once more as he twisted around on the spot. At the same time, half of his face swelled up as well. Please, believe me, my body is really reaching its limit. I can't fight against you anymore. I can't defeat you. The young man's helpless voice sounded yet again. Okay. Overwhelmed with frenzy, Hong Yang charged forward furiously once more, but yet another palm struck his face. And Zhongxian didn't forget to continue his humble bragging either. I am really exhausted, let me go. I want to rest, don't come anymore. Hong Yang charged over once more. Pa. No, this is really my limit. Oh, I'm going to pass out. It was as if the young man's hand was infused with some kind of sorcery. Each and every time, it would strike Hong Yang's face accurately. Despite trying out a dozen different movement techniques, the young man's palm would still land on his face with inconceivable precision. More importantly, after each slap, the young man would act as if he was going to fall without fail, as if he was the victim over here. If you can't hold on anymore, just faint then. You say that you can't hold on any longer each time, but you still manage to slap me without fail each time I charge forward. Can you be any more shameless than that? Hong Yang really felt that his sanity was being severely challenged over here. He wasn't the only one who felt that. Every single person on the spectator stand was also completely dumbfounded. Their minds were too crazed over the happenings on the field that they even forgot how to react with their bodies. They knew Hong Yang's strength very well, conqueror of 100, unmatched in his power class. They thought that it should be easy for him to teach an arrogant newcomer a lesson. But who could have thought that such would happen instead? Each time Hong Yang charged over, he would be smacked back in place by a slap. Then, the young man would wobble on the spot, as if he would collapse at any moment. And the cycle would just repeat and repeat. With each slap, the indomitable Hong Yang in their hearts would erode by a bit, to the point that nothing was left at all. What that was even more shocking was that the fellow that was on the verge of fainting was actually still completely intact. Throughout the course of the battle, he hadn't sustained the slightest injury at all. Did I really just fight with that monster? The faces of the scar-faced young man and the others were completely pale. At the same time, Chen Shu's head also cowered back with every slap that had been dealt. At this rate, it seemed like it would be long before his head was buried into his neck. That was Hong Yang, the invincible gladiator of the Ring of Death. To be smacked around so easily as if a little chick, just how powerful could that newcomer be? This was too exaggerated. And he, Chen Shu, actually provoked such a figure. It was fortunate that the other party didn't hold a grudge against him over that matter, or else he would have already turned into a lifeless corpse. Stop hitting me, I really am not a match for you. Stop it. The crisp slaps and helpless exclamations continued sounding on the ring. Putong. At some point in time, Hong Yang finally came to the limit of his strength and collapsed to the ground, knocked out. Even up to the moment that he lost consciousness, his heart was filled with indignance. In his many years on the Ring of Death, this was the first time he had been pummeled so indignantly and humiliatingly. Before his vision turned dark, he took one last look at his opponent and saw the young man was still swaying on the spot, no different from before. It seemed as if he would fall at any time, but somehow, he just kept standing on. The newcomer defeated Hong Yang. I lost the bet again. That was the money I took from my wife's secret stash. Because it was Hong Yang fighting, there were many who had placed huge bets on Hong Yang's victory. Thus, when they saw Hong Yang collapsing on the ground, knocked out, their faces turned completely livid. There were even a few who burst into tears. After losing several rounds, they thought that they would be able to recoup some of their losses through Hong Yang. Yet, who could have thought that this match would only further their losses, plunging them deeper into the abyss? If only they had known this in advance, they would have bet their everything on Zhong Xian. But speaking of which, just where did this inconspicuous little lad pop up from him? To be able to defeat even the conqueror of 100 with such ease. This duel. Zhong Xian is the victor. After waiting for 10 seconds, Hong Yang still remained completely motionless. So, the voice from before declared loudly, but the disbelief in his voice was still clear for all to hear. We're rich. We have really struck it rich this time. At odds with the depressing atmosphere drifting along the spectator stand, upon hearing the news of Zhong Xian's victory, Zhong Zhouxiao leaped up in excitement and cried out. The payout for this match was a little more than 110, which meant to say that as long as Zhong Xian won, the 1800 concentrated high-tier spirit stone would bring him a return of nearly 20,000. Even as the offspring of the Zhong clan, he had never seen that many concentrated high-tier spirit stone before. Completely broke when they first entered the black market, in less than 2 hours, their wealth had actually leaped up to nearly 20,000. Zhongshe was really a walking spirit mine. Furthermore, he was the type that could produce countless spirit stones without using an excavator. With so many of it, it should be enough to fulfill Zhongshe's needs. With this thought in mind, Zhong Zhouxiao walked over to the betting counter and passed over the document in his hand over. I have come here to collect my payout. If I'm not mistaken, you owe me a total of 19,800 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. 19,800? Before the person in charge could speak, a cold harumph suddenly sounded. Following which, a middle-aged man walked over and spoke authoritatively. We suspect that you have been cheating in the Ring of Death, so the bet that you have made in this match will be annul. Chapter 1268 Beating Up the Boss annulled? Zhong Zhouxiao was taken aback for an instant before his eyebrows shot up. What do you mean by that? Exactly as it sounds, the middle-aged man harumphed. Whatever gambling we conduct in our Ring of Death is built upon the idea of fairness, but you collaborated with one of the challengers of the ring, one feigning weakness on the ring to influence the payout and the other to make the bets. This is considered a cheating behavior, and it is a violation of our rules. Not only will your winnings be confiscated, you are also to compensate the Ring of Death for your disruptive behavior. Compensate? Zhong Jiuxiao's face turned livid. You are hereby under arrest under the charges of disrupting the black market's order and fraud. Men, capture that fellow. The middle-aged man commanded with a grand wave of his hand. Voila! In the blink of an eye, a dozen guards dressed in tight-fitting armor, each possessing a cultivation of primordial spirit realm pinnacle, dashed forward and surrounded Zhong Jiuxiao tightly. You all. Not expecting that the black market would refuse to acknowledge its loss, attempting to capture him even, Zhong Jiuxiao was seething with rage. With a raise of his hands, a Saint Intermediate tier sword materialized before him, ready to make a move at his command. While he had the strength to challenge opponents stronger than him, there were simply too many people before him at the moment. Furthermore, from the start to the end, the middle-aged man hadn't been concealing leaving aperture realm pinnacle cultivation. Even if he were to utilize all of the means at his disposal, he would be no match for the middle-aged man. To think that the black market would resort to forcing others to submit after losing in a gamble. Is this how you all usually act? But before anyone could make a move, an impassive voice sounded in the air. Following which, the young man who had just defeated Hong Yang on the ring suddenly appeared on the spectator stand as well, and his displeasure was clearly carved onto his face. He was intending to use the money he had won to attend the auction and buy down the annal of bedstead disquisition, but who knew that not only would the black market refuse to pay up, they even had Zhong Jiuxiao surrounded. Unable to watch on anymore, Zhong Xian flew over from the ring. The both of you collaborated with one another to conduct fraud in the Ring of Death, and that's a clear violation of our rules. If we don't punish you to make a warning to the others, how can our Ring of Death continue to operate if everyone were to do the same? The middle-aged man flung his sleeves furiously. The middle-aged man was the boss of the black market. 20,000 concentrated high-tier spirit stones, the entire fortune of their black market was only worth about this much. If they were to really pay this sum to those two, their black market might really have to shut down for good. You want to talk rules with me? Sure, let's talk just that then. Even the Master Teacher Pavilion, an organization which was heavily dictated by rules, could hardly do anything to him, and yet, the head of a black market actually wanted to talk to him about rules. This was almost the same as flaunting your wealth before a bank. Regarding the matches in the Ring of Death, there are no rules preventing anyone from placing any bet. Zhong Jiuxiao is my friend, and he has confidence in my strength, so naturally, he would be inclined to bet on me. Surely there's no problem with that, right? Zhong Xian reasoned. There's no problem about that, but... The boss nodded. There were no rules preventing the kin or friends of a challenger from betting on him. On the contrary, it was common practice. It was in view of the wealth that they could earn that the challengers were willing to go all out in their own fights. Wealth and honor upon victory, poverty and humiliation upon loss, it was the stakes at play here that they were willing to stake even their own life here. As such, this couldn't be considered to be a violation of the rules. Since there's no problem, and you were the one who set the payout under the premise that you would be willing to pay up no matter how much you lost. Given so, what rights do you have to say that we have violated the rules? Zhong Xian interjected the boss words. You were clearly able to achieve a victory easily, but you maliciously feigned weakness on the ring. Such a behavior can be considered as fraud. Fraud? By fraud, do you refer to using trickery and deception to achieve victory? Putting aside the fact that there are no rules to the ring, you can ask everyone here what has happened. In the duel against Hong Yang, I kept telling him that I am no match for him, and that we should stop the duel there and then, but he simply wouldn't listen, insisting adamantly that I should have a fight with him. It's out of no choice that I had to counterattack. Given that the duel is forced upon me in the first place, are you sure that my behavior can be considered to be fraud? Zhong Xian turned to the boss and continued, if I really want to achieve victory that much, I could have just accepted his duel straight. There's no need for me to turn him down again and again. The eyebrows of the boss shot up. He had also been watching the match earlier as well. Indeed, the young man kept telling Hong Yang that he didn't want to fight anymore, but the latter just kept charging at him relentlessly. From such an aspect, if anyone was guilty of cheating, it should be Hong Yang. However, with a huge sum of nearly 20,000 at stake here, he couldn't afford to back down. Knowing that it was impossible for him to win in a proper debate, he flung his sleeves furiously and bellowed, "Don't bother playing word games with me over here. I am the boss of the black market, and my words are the law. Men, take these two troublemakers down. You are just going to use force since you are unable to reason against us. Very well, I would like to see who dares to touch a strand of hair of ours." Zhong Xian bellowed as he swept a cold gaze across his surroundings. "Go!" One of the guards bellowed before taking the lead, charging at Zhong Xian. Even if the fellow before them was strong enough to defeat Hong Yang easily, they had the numerical advantage. On top of that, they were all primordial spirit realm pinnacle experts as well. They were confident that they would be able to take him down easily. The guard brandished his sword furiously, and the cold glint of a sword chi swiftly fell toward Zhong Xian. Considering the lawlessness of the black market, those who were qualified to become guards to ensure order and security had to wield extraordinary strength as well. As the sword chi flew over, the air was groaned under the immense strain from its pressure, as if testifying to the humongous strength behind it. Facing the powerful sword brandish, Zhong Xian didn't bother to dodge at all. Instead, he lifted his finger casually and tapped on the space before him. Pada! The sword chi shattered, and the burst of zhenqi continued gushing forward to the guard. The latter suddenly felt a violent pressure striking his dantian. Following which, his dantian abruptly shattered into countless pieces. Feeling that his zhenqi was gushing out of his body like a leaking balloon, the guard widened his eyes in horror. "Why you crippled my cultivation?" The breaking of one's dantian was equivalent to destroying a person's cultivation. This meant that the countless years of hard work that an individual had put into advancing his cultivation had gone to utter waste. Couldn't be bothered to respond to the guard's question, Zhong Xian continued to move. A series of exploding sounds echoed in the air over the next few breaths, and the dozen of guards that were surrounding Zhong Zhouxiao suddenly collapsed to the ground as well. Feeling as power gradually seeped away from their bodies, a fear so powerful that it left them hardly able to breathe consumed the guards. These guards had made use to the authority that had been granted to them to oppress the weak and make benefits for themselves. Even killing them outright wouldn't be considered as going overboard. In a sense, crippling their dantian could already be considered as a mercy from Zhong Xian to them. But of course, considering all of the evil deeds they had done before through exploiting their strength, this mercy might not be one that they would appreciate. On the other hand, seeing that a mere primordial spirit realm advanced stage cultivator actually crippled his subordinates right before him, the eyes of the boss reddened in fury. Unable to hold himself back anymore, he thrust his palm forward with overwhelming might. Facing the boss palm strike, Zhong Xian had no intentions of dodging either. On the contrary, he took a step forward to receive the other party's palm. He hadn't found a worthy sparring partner ever since he advanced to primordial spirit realm advanced stage. Since this middle-aged man was flinging himself at him, he didn't mind using the other party as a moving punching bag. Boom! As their palms clashed against one another, a resounding explosion swiftly swept across the entire ring of death. Under the shockwave that diffused from the collision of palms, the entire area immediately began collapsing. Most of the spectators had chosen to linger in the area to watch the drama, but in face of the powerful shockwave, they immediately fled in fright. Even Zhong Zhouxiao also had to retreat several dozen meters away before he felt that he was finally a safe distance away. "How can this be? How can you be so powerful?" The boss widened his eyes in astonishment and fright. He thought that even if Zhong Xian possessed strength far beyond his cultivation realm, the latter should still be a long distance away from matching up to him. After all, it was nearly unheard of for a primordial spirit realm cultivator to match a leaving aperture realm cultivator, let alone a leaving aperture realm pinnacle expert like he. Yet, in a direct clash of palms, they were actually on equal footing, for the other party to wield raw strength on par with him. Even seeing it with his own eyes, he still found it hard to believe. "Who in the world are you?" the boss questioned warily. There was no way a person who wielded such overwhelming power could possibly be from a humble background. "I am Zhong Xian. You can etch that name into your head." Zhongxian replied nonchalantly as he flicked his palm and sent the second wave of attack toward the boss. His palm strike appeared to be flimsy on the surface, but for some peculiar reason, it exuded an indomitable aura that was at odds with its exterior. The boss was still intending to say something, but facing such an attack, he knew that he couldn't afford to waste any time on words. He quickly gathered his strength into his fist and launched a counterattack. However, before his fist could meet with Zhongxian's palm, the latter's figure suddenly flickered before abruptly materializing right before him. Before he could react, the palm had already landed lightly on his body. Peng! With a furious spurt of blood, the boss was sent flying all the way back, dragging a long gorge in the ground in his wake. Back when Zhongxian was at Primordial Spirit Realm Intermediate stage, he was already roughly a match for leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle experts, let alone now. The boss might be a powerful cultivator, but he didn't stand a chance at all. After trading 2 blows, Zhongxian also realized that the boss was hardly a challenge at all, so he began losing his interest too. Couldn't be bothered to make a move himself anymore, he waved his hand and commanded, "Go, cripple him for me, hoo-la." From a room connected to the ring below, more than 100 different types of sabers flew forth, headed right toward the boss. These sabers might just be Saint low-tier artifacts, but there were simply too many of them. With all of them launching an offense simultaneously, it didn't take long before the entire area was flooded with saber chi. Upon seeing this sight, the boss widened his eyes in shock. Before he could even put up his defenses, several saber chi had already cut into his body, leaving him blooded all over. These sabers. Seeing the familiar sabers, the eyelids of the middle-aged manager who had led Zhongxian into the ring of death earlier began twitching uncontrollably. These sabers were no other than the weapons they were providing to the challengers of the ring, but these weapons shouldn't have any spirit at all. Why would they listen to that young man's command and attack the boss? That lad must have enchanted them. The middle-aged manager clenched his fists in realization. Very clearly, Zhongxian must have enchanted those weapons. This would also explain why they were so loyal to him, attacking the boss without any hesitation on his command. But he had personally followed that young man into the weapon room, and the young man had only spent a few minutes testing out several weapons before leaving empty-handed. To actually successfully enchant all of these weapons within that short period of time. Just how in the world did he do it? Aside from the middle-aged manager, Zhong Zhouxiao's lips were also twitching from the sight before him. He had known about Zhongxian's unparalleled proficiency in spirit enchantment, but he had never thought that the latter would be so vicious as to tame all of these weapons. Looking at it now, it seemed like Zhongxian had known from the start that the black market would never allow them to walk away with the sum they had won from the Ring of Death from the very start, so he had made preparations against it in advance. Woo! It seemed like the 100 Saint low-tier sabers had been through some kind of special training. Every single attack of theirs was accurately aimed at the blind spot or Mingmen of the boss. Under this furious onslaught of deadly saber chi, it didn't take long for the imposing leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle expert to be bleeding all over. Countless cuts were inflicted throughout his body, and from the looks of it, it seemed like he wasn't too far away from death anymore. Stop. I'm willing to compensate you. Knowing that he might really die at this rate, the boss finally exclaimed anxiously. Even though he felt incredibly frustrated, he knew that there was nothing he could do but to surrender. If the other party really wanted to claim his life, he could have been dead by now. Compensate. Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. With a wave of his hand, the 100 sabers immediately flew back and neatly took their positions behind Zhongxian's back, forming something reminiscent to the feathers of a peacock. Yes, I'm willing to compensate you. Struggling to his feet, the boss took out a storage ring and passed it over. Here are 19,800 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. This was the profit which the black market had accumulated over countless years. If he were to give it away just like that, the black market would soon find itself facing severe financial troubles. But at this point, he had no other choice either. Taking the storage ring, Zhongxian swiftly swept its contents before nodding. There was no mistake with the quantity. It seemed like the other party wasn't playing tricks with him. All right, what are you going to compensate us? These 19,800 concentrated high-tier spirit stones are what we have earned fairly through the gambling earlier, but you have made a move against me and my friend. How do you intend to resolve this matter? Keeping the spirit stones safely into his own storage ring, Zhongxian turned his sight back to the boss and asked, "You still want me to compensate you?" The boss face turned pale in horror. "You have nearly taken everything that I have, and you still want to squeeze me dry? Isn't that a given? Or do you expect to be so magnanimous as to forget what you have just done?" Zhongxian sneered. "How do you want me to compensate you?" The boss asked through gritted teeth. "I heard that your black market has just obtained a certain book, Annal of Bedstead Disquisition." Zhongxian pondered for a moment before asking. Chapter 1269 The Voice in the Mist. The boss hesitated for a moment before slowly nodding. "Fine. I'll get my men to bring it over to you now." As valuable as the Annal of the Bedstead Disquisition was, it was just another artifact to him. If he were to weigh it against his life, it was obvious that his life was way more valuable. With a guillotine right above him at this moment, it was obvious what he should choose. After making a few instructions, it didn't take long for an elder to arrive at the scene with a considerably large jade container in hand. The elder opened the jade container, revealing an ancient book within. The yellowish pages were evidence to the long history behind the book, but it was still generally well preserved. The words on the pages were also pulsating with spiritual energy. Zhongxian took a closer look, and after confirming that it was the Annal of Bedstead Disquisition, he finally nodded before keeping it into his storage ring. Turning to Zhong Jiuxiao, he said, "Let's go." Then, with a powerful leap, he began flying away from the scene. Zhong Jiuxiao and the 100 sabers behind him quickly followed suit. Staring in the direction where they disappeared at, hatred began flooding into the eyes of the boss. "Boss, are we going to let them off just like that?" An elder walked forward and asked. It had been more than 10,000 years since their black market had been established, and they had never suffered such a huge setback. "Let them off? How can I, Ji Lingfeng, allow others to take my items so easily?" The boss narrowed his eyes as he clenched his fists tightly together. What he had lost this time around weren't just spirit stones but his pride as well. If they were to take this lying down, how could the black market uphold its prestige and authority in Qianchong City? Then, what should we do? The young man was strong enough to even overpower their boss, so even if they wanted to exact vengeance, what could they possibly do? "Fetch me my Sword of Faint Whispers." The boss flung his sleeves furiously. "Sword of Faint Whispers? Boss, you can't be thinking of..." The elder narrowed his eyes in disbelief as something surfaced in his mind. "That's right. I'm going to head there and have him make a move in my stead." A cold glint flashed across the boss' eyes as he gritted his teeth in fury. "Yes." The elder hurriedly rushed off, and not too long later, he returned with a sword in hand. At first sight, there was nothing that set the sword apart from the others. However, with just a slight flick of it, an incomparably chilling sword chi would shroud its blade, leaving one feeling as if one had been plunged into the midst of a winter's night. On top of that, one could also vaguely hear some soft mutterings in one's ears, as if the sword was whispering to one. This was the Sword of Faint Whispers, a top-notch Saint Intermediate tier artifact, possessing a might comparable to a leaving aperture realm pinnacle expert. Without a doubt, it was one of the strongest weapons in Qianchong Empire. Look into the background of that Zhongxian. With the sword in hand, the boss' disposition immediately changed. In an instant, he appeared to be many times stronger than before. "Yes." The elder quickly backed away to arrange some men to look into Zhongxian's background. On the other hand, the boss consumed several recovery pills and sat down on the spot to recuperate. Not too long later, the elder returned with a jade token in hand. "This is the information we have gathered on Zhongxian so far. He's from Qingyuan Empire, and he has once succeeded in a pavilion crashing. He has also cleared the preliminary selections of the Sanctum of Sages, and his in Qianchong Empire for the secondary selections. The black market was also known for its outstanding intelligence network as well, so it didn't take long for them to uncover Zhongxian's background." "So he's a talented master teacher, eh? No wonder he dares to cause trouble here." The boss stood up and uttered menacingly. After a moment of recuperation, even though his wounds were still severe, he was at least out of danger for the time being. You, stay here and keep the situation in check. I'll head out for a moment. Flinging his sleeves, the boss began walking away with the sword of faint whispers in his hand. After leaving the black market, the boss flew for quite some time before he reached the boundary of a land completely shrouded in mist. You have come. From the midst of the mist, a faint voice sounded. Yes, I want you to kill someone for me, the boss spat coldly. Price. I'll give you the sword of faint whispers in exchange. With a flick of his wrist, the sword in the boss' hand slowly floated up. Are you certain? A trace of agitation could be heard in the voice from the mist. I'm certain, the boss replied in resolution. I know that you are camping here for the legend, but you should also be aware that it's impossible to accomplish it without the sword of faint whispers. After a moment of silence, the voice in the midst asked, Who? His name is Zhongxian, a master teacher. He has cleared the preliminary selections of the Sanctum of Sages. Here is his information. With a flick of his wrist, the boss threw the jade token he had received from the elder earlier into the mist. A master teacher who has successfully crashed the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion? It seems like he's quite a prodigy. The voice in the mist sounded a little hesitant. A master teacher who had successfully crashed a master teacher pavilion would surely be highly regarded by the headquarters. If it were to be known that he had killed such a prodigy, the rage of the master teacher pavilion headquarters would be one he wouldn't be able to withstand. Cut the nonsense and tell me whether you are willing to accept the deal or not, the boss asked impatiently. I don't have much time left. If I still can't open that place, I reckon that 3 years will be my limit. Killing a prodigy in exchange for an opportunity for a breakthrough doesn't sound that bad. However, this matter must be carefully planned so as to ensure that no one finds out about it. The voice in the mist spoke slowly. I know that much too. The boss replied coldly. Regardless of whether he was the one who had done it personally, the crime of plotting the death of a prodigy of the Master Teacher Pavilion was grave. The Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters had to make a firm stand on the matter so as to deter others from doing the same and ensure the safety of their younger talents. Even if he had the entire black market behind him, the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters still wouldn't hesitate to smash him into the ground. The might of the #1 occupation on the Master Teacher continent was not to be underestimated. Any power would have to think twice before laying its hand on the young talents of the Master Teacher Pavilion. This was similar to the disciples of powerful sects as well. Even if you were to know that they were weak and carried invaluable artifacts with them, would you still dare to make a move on them? All right, I have received your request, so you can leave now. I'll think over the matter and give you an answer 3 days later. The voice in the mist hesitated for a moment before replying. There's no need for that. I'll wait here for your response. I want to see you kill him with my own eyes. I'll give the sword of faint whispers to you as soon as he dies. There was a moment of silence before the voice in the mist spoke once more. Very well. Come in then. Yuan holding the sword tightly in his hand, the boss walked into the mist, and it didn't take long before his silhouette vanished altogether. I never thought the underground black market isn't located beneath the manor we saw before but in the middle of a mountain range. After leaving the black market, Zhongxian swiftly kept the sabers following behind him. Gazing downward, he realized that he wasn't underground, or even anywhere near the manor they had stopped at before they were blindfolded and brought into the black market at that. Instead, the black market was actually located in the belly of a mountain. The manor was just a method of deception to hide the black market away from prying eyes. It was no wonder why one would have to be blindfolded before entering the black market. Considering the nature of the black market, it also wasn't surprising why they would go to the extent of making such precautions as well. Even if the black market had some value of existence to Qianchong Empire, there was no saying when the Master Teacher Pavilion would decide to stop tolerating them and launch a crusade against them. It would be unwise to entrust their safety to the whims of others. You have really done me a great favor this time around. Here are 1,000 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Take it as a token of appreciation from me. Zhongxian flicked his wrist and took a pile of concentrated high-tier spirit stones out. Zhong Jiuxiao was astonished. How can I take so many spirit stones from you? 1,000 concentrated high-tier spirit stones, this was a fortune which he couldn't even fathom possessing. Take it. You will need it to raise your cultivation as quickly as possible so that you can pass the secondary selection. Zhong Xian waved his hand. Had it not been for Zhong Jiuxiao informing him about the existence of the black market and making the bets in his stead, he wouldn't have been able to earn such a huge sum either. He had provided the brawns, whereas Zhong Jiuxiao had provided the means. In that sense, Zhong Jiuxiao deserved every single one of these concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Then, I'll be thanking you for this generous gift then, Zhongshe. Knowing what Zhong Xian had said was the truth, it would be a waste if he were to fail at this point after all the trouble they had gone through for him to clear the preliminary selection. Zhong Jiuxiao accepted the concentrated high-tier spirit stones heartily and kept them into his storage ring. Somehow, being with the young man before him had instilled him with an endless drive for cultivation, and he found himself motivated to work harder than ever to reach greater heights. Perhaps this was the reason why others would naturally gravitate to him. He had been filled with envy and grudges for the other party in the past, but in this instant, he found that, at some point in time, those emotions had already disappeared without a trace. There's no need to stand on ceremony. Unaware of the thoughts in Zhong Jiuxiao's mind, Zhong Xian casually waved his hand. By the time they returned to their residence in the Master-Teacher Pavilion, the sun had already set. Zhong Xian entered the myriad ant hive nest once more and took out the concentrated high-tier spirit stones he had just obtained. He first conditioned his state to its peak before attempting for a breakthrough. Not too long later, he overcame his bottleneck and finally reached the long-awaited primordial spirit realm pinnacle. All right, time for me to cultivate my soul. With plenty of concentrated high-tier spirit stones at hand, Zhong Xian began cultivating his Heaven's Path soul art as well. 4 hours later, his soul cultivation had reached primordial spirit realm pinnacle as well. With this, my strength should be on par with half-grand Dominion realm experts. Feeling the zhanqi rushing through his body, as well as his enhanced strength and grasp over the spatial laws, Zhong Xian nodded in satisfaction. Back when he was at primordial spirit realm advanced stage, ordinary leaving aperture realm pinnacle cultivators were already no match for him. Now that he had achieved a breakthrough in his zhanqi cultivation and soul cultivation, his fighting prowess had been enhanced by at least twofold at the minimum. It could be said that with his current strength, even if he didn't use the puppets he had obtained from the marshlands of the northern meadows, he would still be able to overpower Pavilion Master Yu with ease. But after my cultivation reached primordial spirit realm pinnacle, it seems like concentrated high-tier spirit stones have become completely ineffective on me as well. While it was gladdening to see that he had managed to make significant advancements in his fighting prowess and cultivation, the ineffectiveness of the concentrated high-tier spirit stones meant that he would have to start looking for more advanced cultivation resources too. In the past, just a single concentrated high-tier spirit stone would suffice for him to make multiple breakthroughs, but now, even 100 of them would barely make a difference in his cultivation. Even with the 10,000 or so concentrated high-tier spirit stones in hand, it would still be nigh difficult for him to push for a breakthrough to half-leaving aperture realm. His Heaven's Path zhanqi simply had too high a demand for the purity of spiritual energy he absorbed for his cultivation, and he had also anticipated that this would happen as well. Nevertheless, he still couldn't help but feel a little stifled by the situation. It wasn't easy for him to earn so many concentrated high-tier spirit stones at once, but in just a few moments, they had already become completely useless to him. It seemed that if he wanted to make progress in his cultivation, he must continue fighting on and forge his path forward. Clone, this is the cultivation technique for the Heaven's Path soul art. Hurry up and cultivate. Zhong Xian said as he sent the content of the Heaven's Path soul art to his clone telepathically and tossed a pile of concentrated high-tier spirit stones over. At this moment, his clone had already finished consuming the Qingtian Emperor's soul, and his fighting prowess had also risen to an incredible level as well. All right. Without wasting any time, Zhong Xian's clone began on his cultivation. As they had originated from the same soul, their rates of cultivation were nearly the same. In a few hours, his clone had already finished cultivating the Heaven's Path soul art. Through assimilating the energy of the Qingtian Emperor's soul on top of that, he managed to surpass Zhong Xian in terms of soul cultivation, reaching quasi-leaving aperture realm. As long as he overcame the lightning tribulation, he would be able to become a true leaving aperture realm expert. How strong are you at the moment? Seeing that his clone had managed to a significant advancement in his cultivation, Zhongxian couldn't resist asking. I can squash half Grand Dominion Realm ants with a grasp of my hand, and as for Grand Dominion Realm primary stage cultivators, I reckon I should be able to put up a fight. Zhongxian's clone replied with his head raised haughtily. Hearing those words, Zhongxian's cheeks twitched. Even though it was only a small cultivation stage of difference between half Grand Dominion Realm and Grand Dominion Realm, there was a vast gap in their fighting prowess. At Grand Dominion Realm, otherwise known as the Indomitable Realm, cultivators would gain the ability to create their dominion. They would be the absolute dictator within the area of their dominion. Regardless of how many people were gathered in the area, as long as none wielded strength on par with them, they would be as good as invincible. For his clone to wield strength on par with Grand Dominion Realm primary stage experts. Just on this itself, it was clear that his clone was already many times stronger than him. Such strength paired with that fellow's monstrous regenerative ability. Was there still anyone in Qianchong Empire who would be a match for him? After cultivating for so long, it turned out that he was still unable to keep up with his clone. How embarrassing. It seems like I am still cultivating too slowly, Zhongxian remarked with his face lowered in shame. Chapter 1270 Dominion. He might still have been able to derive some feeling of superiority when comparing himself with others, but against his clone, he had been wrecked time and time again to the point where it had nearly become a trauma in his heart. Shaking his head, Zhongxian tried to ignore the feeling of helplessness within him and took out a jade container. Opening it lightly, an ancient book came into sight. Annal of Bedstead Disquisition. By scanning it with his eyes, an equivalent book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. After swiftly looking through the content in the book, Zhongxian thought, it is indeed related to the cultivation technique of the Luo clan. However, it isn't a cultivation technique itself but a compilation of insight. Recorded in the Annal of Bedstead Disquisition was Pavilion Master Yang's interpretation of Sage Luo's lecture. It did not contain a cultivation technique but a new interpretation toward cultivation. To make an analogy, it would be like learning a studying method. As long as a cultivator were to fully grasp those insights, their speed of cultivation should increase significantly. Just that, the Heaven's Path divine art was already no different from the best studying method in the world. While the insights to cultivation recorded in the Annal of Bedstead Disquisition were not too bad, superior to most interpretations of cultivation out there, it was completely useless to him. After studying the book for a moment longer, Zhongxian eventually shook his head. I was still expecting something out of it due to how valuable it is. What a pity. He had thought that by learning the key to the Luo clan's cultivation technique, he would be able to better deal with them when the time came. But thinking about it now, how could the cultivation technique of a sage clan possibly be obtained that easily? If, by any chance, someone leaked the Luo clan's cultivation technique, with their massive influence, they would have surely swiftly found it and destroyed it utterly. There was no way they would allow their cultivation technique to be auctioned in a small black market in the Qianchong Empire. While the Luo clan's insight into cultivation is not too bad, it seems like it's still a far stretch from matching ancient sage Qiu Wu's heavenly art of dimension unravel. From the Annal of Bedstead Disquisition, it was apparent that the Luo clan specialized in the study of spatial laws. However, in terms of depth of comprehension, ancient sage Qiu Wu's understanding of space was clearly a more direct interpretation of the world compared to the Luo clan's. But looking at it now, there seemed to be striking similarities between the two of them, as if they originated from the same source. A thought suddenly emerged in Zhongxian's mind. Right. If I compile this together with the two-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, will I be able to perfect it? There were 5 dans to the heavenly art of dimension unravel, and so far, he had only cultivated the first dan of the technique. The reason he had not continued was because there were simply too many flaws from the second dan onward, and his cultivation had not met the mark either. But since his cultivation had already reached primordial spirit realm pinnacle, he could try cultivating the two-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel if he could perfect it. So, Zhongxian took out the two-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel and placed it together with the Annal of Bedstead Disquisition. Compile. Zhong Xian's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly flipped it open. It really worked. There was a total of 5 dans to the heavenly art of dimension unravel, namely compress, traverse, control, creation, and destruction. He had already fully mastered compress, and by using it in unison with the unbounded Voyager, he had gained the ability to carry out near-instantaneous movement within a radius of 100 meters, as if teleportating. It was also his superior grasp over spatial laws that granted him the strength to rival half-grand Dominion realm experts. If he could master the 2 dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, he would be able to increase his fighting prowess another a notch. Excited, Zhong Xian flicked his wrist to place all his concentrated high-tier spirit stones before him in a pile before immersing himself into the cultivation of the Traverse realm. Some time later, Zhong Xian finally stood up, and his aura began to rise steadily. After a long moment of hard work, even though he had not mastered the 2 dan heavenly art of dimension unravel traverse yet, his understanding of space did advance by leaps and bounds. With his previous strength, he had only been on par with half-grand Dominion realm experts. However, with his current strength, he might even be able to rival true Grand Dominion realm primary stage expert. Release. Willing it with his mind, a sphere of faint light with a radius of 1 meter immediately appeared around Zhong Xian, and he could feel the absolute control he wielded within this space. Feeling the effects of the light sphere, Zhong Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. Even though this isn't a Dominion, it has similar effects to one. This light sphere was created by using his soul energy to warp the surrounding laws of space. He had absolute control over anything that was within this light sphere, and unless there was another individual who could wrestle the control over this space from him, he would practically be invincible. Let me test out my strength. With a flick of his wrist, the golden origin cauldron appeared before Zhong Xian. Attack me with your full might. All right. Even though the golden origin cauldron was unsure what Zhong Xian was up to, it still agreed to the request. It leaped powerfully into the sky before descending heavily upon Zhong Xian. Possessing a fighting prowess on par with leaving Aperture Realm advanced stage cultivators, the speed at which the golden origin cauldron was capable of moving at had already exceeded the speed of sound. Nevertheless, when it came within a meter of Zhong Xian, its speed abruptly decreased. Freeze, Zhong Xian muttered softly. In the instant that the golden origin cauldron was just about to touch Zhong Xian, it came to a completely halt. No matter how it struggled, its body would not budge at all. As long as I will it, I will even be able to destroy the spirit of the golden origin cauldron easily. Feeling the power that he wielded over the golden origin cauldron, Zhong Xian was astonished. It was no wonder everyone said that the difference between each cultivation realm from leaving Aperture Realm onward was an unbreachable rift. From the looks of it now, it seemed like those words were not hearsay. He had thought that the prowess that Grand Dominion realm cultivators wielded had been exaggerated as long as there was sufficiently large group of cultivators surrounding a Grand Dominion realm cultivator, it should have been a matter of time before he eventually slipped up and erred. But having first-hand experience with the prowess of a Dominion, he realized that he had been too naive. Within the sphere of a Dominion, there was no such thing as chance. Unless one could destroy the Dominion with a greater power or interrupt the activation of the Dominion, the chances of success were practically null. However, the maintenance of a Dominion is really taxing on one's Junqi and primordial spirit. After releasing the golden origin cauldron, Zhong Xian released the light sphere around him, and a feeling of extreme fatigue swiftly consumed him. Even though this Dominion-like light sphere was extremely powerful, granting him the strength to fight toe-to-toe with a Grand Dominion realm primary stage cultivator, the rate at which his Junqi and soul energy depleted was truly frightening. Despite having cultivated the Saint Ascension Decipher, not to mention that he was a celestial saint as well, just maintaining the light sphere for 10 seconds had left him feeling sapped and exhausted. I should only activate this technique in times of emergency. As powerful as the light sphere was, if he depleted all his energy from using it, he would be placed in a vulnerable position for quite a period of time. Thus, unless in times of emergency, it was best for him to avoid using it. Zhong Xian rested for a moment to recover his depleted Junqi. At this moment, a thought suddenly came to his mind, and he clenched his fists in agitation. Wait a moment. Since I have comprehended a Dominion-like ability, Does this mean that I will be able to crush my clone easily? All along, he had been put down by his clone, and the shame and embarrassment had weighed down on him for far too long. Since he had managed to comprehend dominion ahead of his clone, it was about time for him to return the favor. With this thought in mind, Zhongxian did not hesitate to leap into action. He immediately called his clone over. Without wasting any words, an earth-shaking, mountain-crushing battle began. Frightened, the Golden Origin Cauldron swiftly retreated to a corner and trembled fearfully. 3 breaths later, Zhongxian had been imprinted with clear panda eyes. 5 breaths later, huge spurts of blood from Zhongxian dyed the sky crimson. 10 breaths later, an unmoving human was lying on the ground. Nice try, better luck next time. Clapping to rid the dirt off his hands, Zhongxian's clone turned around smugly and walked away. Feeling utterly stifled inside, Zhongxian could only drive his Heaven's Path Zhenqi to heal up. He had thought that after comprehending dominion, he would be able to utterly thrash his clone, but who knew that the other party would actually still be able to forcefully move even under the effects of his dominion. In the end, he had still been pummeled. That monster. Just how in the world did he cultivate? Driving his Zhenqi 2 circulations around his body, Zhongxian managed to recover from his injuries. He looked at his clone helplessly for a moment before decisively leaving the ant-hive nest. Oh well. I guess I'll just have to come back and exact vengeance the next time I make a major breakthrough in my cultivation. Returning to his room, Zhongxian walked out and noted that the sun had already risen. Breathing in the morning air, he felt extraordinarily refreshed. After a night of cultivation, even though it was a pity that he still was not a match for his clone, he did manage to advance his fighting prowess considerably. A moment after walking out of the residence, he suddenly saw Zhong Zhouxiao rushing over with unconcealable glee on his face. "Zhongshe, I have managed to achieve a breakthrough to Primordial Spirit Realm Advanced Stage. Ha ha ha." Even though he knew it was likely that he would be outdone very soon, he still could not help but to take pride in the fact that he had managed to catch up with Zhongxian for the time being. To be able to catch up to a celestial master teacher. This was something he could brag to his offspring about in the future. Congratulations. Zhongxian nodded. Thank you. Since my cultivation is on par with Zhongshe now, I think that I should be able to clear the secondary selection. Halfway through his words, Zhong Zhouxiao's words suddenly clogged up in his throat. His face twitched a little as his eyes widened in disbelief. "Zhongshe, you are at Primordial Spirit Realm Pinnacle? UN. I managed to sufficiently accumulate my cultivation, so I was able to push for a breakthrough," Zhongxian replied with a nod. "You managed to sufficiently accumulate your cultivation?" Zhong Zhouxiao nearly burst into tears. "Accumulate your head. It was just yesterday that you made a breakthrough, and yet, over the course of a night, you made another breakthrough. What can you possibly accumulate in a single day? Even genius cultivators would at least take several months to advance a single cultivation stage after reaching Primordial Spirit Realm, and yet, you only took a single night. Can you be any more terrifying than that?" Zhong Zhouxiao's eyes reddened in frenzy as he felt a pail of cold water washing away the little bit of confidence that he had just barely built up. When other cultivators achieved swift breakthroughs, their strength would be volatile, resulting in a reduction in their fighting prowess. Yet, despite advancing so swiftly, that fellow was actually still be able to exert unbelievable strength. Really, Zhong Zhouxiao felt that he should stop trying to compare with the young man before him, or else he might just die of trauma someday. On the other hand, seeing how dejected Zhong Zhouxiao was, Zhongxian suddenly felt the exasperation and frustration that he had just felt from being pummeled by his clone vanishing without a trace. Satisfied with the outcome, he nodded in approval. Indeed. While he might have been far from a match for his clone, he was still stronger than the common populace. Knowing that he would only get more and more depressed talking about cultivation, Zhong Zhouxiao quickly changed the topic. "Zhongshe, Zhao Shi asked us to gather at the main hall. The secondary selection is about to begin." Nodding in response, Zhongxian quickly followed Zhong Zhouxiao over to the main hall. In the main hall, the 30 or so master teachers he had seen the previous day had already arrived. They were standing neatly in 2 rows with solemn looks on their faces. Upon seeing Zhongxian, They swiftly greeted him before falling silent. Zhong Xian and Zhong Zhouxiao took their positions at the end of the 2 rows, and quick sweeping over the room with their gazes, they noted that Zhao Xingmo and Pavilion Master Yu were standing in the middle. Pavilion Master Yu's body was still a little swollen, and there were various patches of bruising all around. It was apparent that he had yet to recover from the beating that he had received from the puppets the previous day. The higher one's cultivation, the lower the effectiveness of a pill. Given his cultivation realm, if he wanted to recover from his wounds quickly, he would have to consume a grade 8 pill at the very minimum. However, even as the head of the Qianchong Empire Master Teacher Pavilion, a grade 8 pill was not a commodity that could easily be acquired. Since everyone has arrived, let's not waste any time and begin the secondary selection. Stepping forward, Zhong Xingmo shot a sweeping gaze across all of the candidates before saying, "In the selections of the Sanctum of Sages, we aim to assess the strength, intelligence, ability to assess the big picture, and many other key capabilities of the candidates. In the preliminary selection, we have assessed you on your strength. As long as you wield sufficient strength, you will be able to clear the selection easily. However, the secondary selection won't be as simple as that. Now, I shall begin explaining the rules for the secondary selection." Everyone's ears perked up, and their eyes narrowed, not wanting to miss any words or gestures that he spoke or made. This would determine whether they would be able to enter the Sanctum of Sages or not, so they had to obtain every scrap of information they could get about the secondary selection. As complicated as I have made it sound, there is only a single rule to the secondary selection. That is to use every means possible to eliminate your opponent. With a solemn look, Zhao Xingmo raised his hand and declared grandly, "The challenge for the secondary selection shall be a caged battle royal." Chapter 1271 Caged Battle Royal. Caged Battle Royal? Hearing the theme of the secondary selection, the candidates widened their eyes in astonishment. They had heard of Caged Battle Royal before, and they understood the significance behind it as well. In ancient times, when the otherworldly demonic tribe was still the dominant power in the Master-Teacher continent, they would often conduct caged battle royals to entertain themselves. To put it in simple terms, caged battle royal consisted of placing a group of men in the same cage and leaving them to fight it out amongst themselves. The last one standing would be spared, and the rest would become sacrifices for his survival. It was an extremely brutal event, testing of a human's true nature. For their own survival, there were those who would even lay their hands on their kin or even their own children. Such practice had been considered to be vile by mankind, spurned by the Master-Teacher Pavilion, so why would the Sanctum of Sages use it in their secondary selections? Don't worry, the caged battle royal won't be a slaughter but an elimination match. Noticing that everyone's expression was growing unnatural, Zhao Xingmo waved his hand and explained, "We'll be placing you in an isolated island, and within 3 days, you must find and eliminate 13 amongst you in order to clear the examination. Of course, the method of elimination will not be killing the individual but breaking his allocated jade token. If we were to find that you have willfully killed any one of the candidates, your candidacy will be stripped immediately." Breaking allocated jade tokens? This will be difficult. Grave expressions appeared on the faces around. They were all top-notch geniuses, and while there was some disparity in their strength, each of them wielded exceptional life preservation and escape means. If it was just a normal battle royal, they would still be able to eliminate other candidates through springing surprise assaults and swiftly incapacitating their enemy. However, if they had to break the jade token without endangering the other party's life, the difficulty would be hiked up significantly. Of course, you aren't the only ones on the isolated island too. There will be saint beasts, traps prepared in advance, and treacherous terrains. While trying to eliminate others, you will have to try your best to protect yourself as well. A glint flashed across Zhao Xingmo's eyes before he continued, "Just a warning in advance, if you think that you can just hide at one corner and wait for others to be eliminated, let me make this clear right now. You will be forcefully eliminated by me as well. The Sanctum of Sages needs no cowards and escapees. Also, if you all were to fail to eliminate 13 people within 3 days, everyone shall lose their candidacy. In other words, we have to eliminate others or else we won't be able to get into the Sanctum of Sages even if we were to last till the end. This is too difficult. Well, if it's that easy to enroll into the #1 academy of the master teacher continent, it would surely be overflowing with freshmen each year. After a moment of commotion, everyone fell silent. While the rules of the caged battle royal may seem simple, it was actually far more demanding than being literally placed into a cage. It wasn't just a simple battle royal anymore. It was demanding on one's overall capabilities, be it planning, analyzing the situation, tracking, danger sensing, and much more. As expected of the selection of the Sanctum of Sages, its difficulty was indeed at a different level. These are your jade tokens. They represent each of your identities. You can choose to carry it with you, hide it, or anything else. The only condition is that the jade token must remain on the island. As long as your jade token isn't shattered, that would mean that you aren't eliminated yet, Zhao Xingmo said as he flicked his wrist, and more than 30 jade tokens flew toward the crowd. The jade tokens can be hidden as well. In other words, even if we were to successfully capture others, as long as we can't find the other party's jade token, there's nothing we can do at all. As long as we can't find the jade token, there's nothing we can do to eliminate a candidate. But how in the world are we supposed to find a jade token that can be hidden anywhere on an isolated island? The crowd was stunned once more. They could hardly believe what they were hearing. If the rules enforced that the jade token must remain on one's body, after defeating an opponent, they would at least be able to search the other party's body and destroy his jade token. On the other hand, if the hiding of jade tokens were to be permitted as well, even if they were to successfully track down and subdue an opponent, there would be nothing they could do to eliminate him if he didn't have his jade token on him. In the first place, eliminating an opponent through jade tokens had already hiked up the difficulty considerably. Now that the hiding of jade tokens was allowed as well, the difficulty would be increased to at least tenfold of before. This is also a test of one's state of mind. In contrast to the shocked faces around him, a gleam flashed across Zhongxian's eyes. Perhaps it was because he wasn't as pressured to enter the Sanctum of Sages as compared to the others. From a bystander's point of view, he was able to see through the crux of the rules in an instant. Zhao Xingmo had intentionally said that they could hide the jade token, but to be honest, where else could be safer than with keeping it with oneself? To hide one's jade token was as good as leaving one's fate to luck, gambling on whether the others would be able to find his jade token or not. If a person couldn't even trust himself enough to guard his jade token himself, it was likely that he was lacking in certain necessary traits that a leader of mankind should have. Most likely, such an action would result in a huge penalty of some kind. But of course, he wouldn't go so far as to remind the others of this matter. Stretching his hand forward, he grabbed the jade token flying toward him lightly. It was a specially forged black jade. Carved on the back of the jade token was his name, whereas the front was inscribed with a peculiar kind of pattern. The pattern seemed to grant the jade token a communication function that would allow Zhao Xingmo to determine whether a candidate had been eliminated or not. Zhao Shu, if someone were to utilize artifacts beyond our prowess in the secondary selection, wouldn't we stand no chance at all? A genius from Qianchong Empire, Ma Minghai, asked. Hearing those words, everyone's sights swiftly turned to Zhongxian. Yesterday, that fellow threw out more than 100 puppets and pummeled the half-grand Dominion Realm Pavilion Master Yu with ease. If those puppets were to be used against them, they wouldn't stand a chance at all. In the caged battle royal, out of concerns over fairness, no candidate is to use any weapon or artifact to execute any actions that would directly or indirectly lead to the elimination of a candidate. Anyone who flouts this rule will be eliminated without exception, Zhao Xingmo declared. That's good. The crowd heaved a sigh of relief. As long as weapons and artifacts weren't allowed, even if Zhongxian possessed superior fighting prowess, there was no need to fear him. While they might not have been able to defeat him face to face, but they would at least still be able to use their life preservation methods to flee from him. Is there any other questions? Zhao Shu, may I inquire where the isolated island will be? Roughly how big would it be? Also, regarding the traps and saint beasts you spoke of, how strong would they be? A master teacher asked. These are secrets. You will have figure those out yourself after arriving at the location. All right, if there are no other questions, we shall set off right now. Oh right, You aren't allowed to utilize remote communication artifacts to communicate with one another either. Anyone caught doing so will be eliminated as well. Zhao Xingmo warned strictly, don't even dream of cheating or attempting to exploit loopholes in the rules. Since I dare to set these rules, I have my own way of keeping a lookout and enforcing them. Yes. The candidates nodded. Seeing that everyone had understood the rules, Zhao Xingmo decided to say no more. He turned to Pavilion Master Yu and said, Pavilion Master Yu, send them off. Pavilion Master Yu nodded before raising his hand. In the next moment, over 30 aerial saint beasts descended to the ground. There was a cultivator on each of them, and they passed a blindfold over to the candidates, gesturing for them to put them on before leading them to the back of the saint beast. This blindfold was similar to the one Zhongxian had worn prior to being led to the black market. Once put on, not only was one's sight impeded, even one's spiritual perception would be severely limited as well. Under the lead of the cultivators, the candidates soon heard a resounding call before the saint beasts soared into the sky. After flying for some time, Zhongxian suddenly felt his feet stepping on solid ground once more. Tearing away his blindfold, he soon realized that he was standing in the midst of a dense forest. His surroundings were completely silent, and there was not a single person to be seen. It seemed like the purpose of covering their eyes wasn't just to keep the location where they were heading to a mystery, more importantly, it was also to prevent them to finding their comrades easily and teaming up. As such, each person would have to depend on himself for most part of the selection. Zhong Jiuxiao did make substantial advancement in his cultivation, reaching primordial spirit realm advanced stage. On top of that, after my guidance along the way, his combat skills have also visibly improved as well. As long as he doesn't encounter Ma Minghai and the others, he should still be able to cope. Admittedly, Zhong Jiuxiao's fighting prowess was still far lacking as compared to Zhongxian, but no matter what, he was still an offspring from a powerful clan, and he had received Zhongxian's guidance as well. As long as he didn't meet with enemies that were too powerful, he should be able to deal with them with relative ease. At the very least, escaping shouldn't be a problem. Deciding not to think too much into it, Zhongxian leaped onto a nearby tree branch to assess his surroundings, only to find that the forest extended far into the horizon. Rather than a remote island, he seemed to be in the depths of a mountain range instead. Is this really an isolated island? This is really way too big. Zhongxian thought in astonishment. To be unable to see the other end even with his current strength, just how big could the island be? 1,000 li? 2,000 li? Or 6,000 li? To find the other 30 or so candidates on an island this big and eliminate them within 3 days, the selection really wasn't as easy as he thought. It seemed like knowing how to track the other candidates was also one of the aspects of assessment. But considering the size of the island, how can Zhao Shi keep a tight watch over what's happening everywhere to enforce his rules? Leaping back to the ground, Zhongxian couldn't help but wonder. Despite having cultivated the Heaven's Path divine art, his spiritual perception was still limited to a radius of roughly 2,500 meters. Ordinary cultivators would only be at around 400 meters or so. Given how large the island was, even if Zhao Xingmo was a Grand Dominion realm expert, it was really hard to believe that he would be able to keep a tight watch over everything that was happening on the island at every moment. Forget it, there's no point thinking about that now. What's the most important at the moment is to find other candidates and eliminate them. Unable to figure out the matter, Zhongxian decided not to think too much into it as well. With his recent breakthroughs, even without a weapon in hand, he would still be able to rival Grand Dominion realm primary stage cultivators. With such fighting prowess, he would be able to eliminate any candidate he encountered without any problem. The ones who should be shivering in fear were his opponents instead. Zhongxian walked along the mountain range for a while, but he soon realized that roaming around aimlessly in such a manner was likely to end in futility. The chances were that he wouldn't be able to find a single person even if he were to walk like this for an entire day. Thus, he flicked his wrist and took out a compass. As a formation master, a compass was a necessary tool. Even though Zhongxian had never really used it before, he had never found the need to do so, he still stored a few of them in his storage ring, and they were of decent quality as well. The spiritual energy is more concentrated in that direction. It seems like the center of the island should be in that direction. I should head over to take a look. After determining a direction, Zhongxian began flitting forward on the ground. He didn't choose to fly for several reasons. Firstly, the area was filled with saint beasts, so he might end up becoming a target if he were to rise to the air. Secondly, he would also attract the attention of the other candidates. Even if he had no fear with his current strength, he still had no intention of being too high profile. Roar! After advancing some distance away, a furious howl suddenly sounded. Following which, Zhongxian saw a massive tiger-bone beast charging in his direction. Just like him, the tiger-bone beast was at primordial spirit realm as well. Even before its approach, one could already feel the authoritative pressure that it commanded weighing down on one's soul, as if it would crush one with ease. Its body is pretty valuable. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. The saint beasts should already be thankful that he wasn't seeking any trouble with them, but this fellow actually still dared to charge over. Since that was the case, he had no intention of holding back either. He raised his palm and crushed it downward. Paji. The body of the tiger-bone beast abruptly froze, as if someone had sealed it in place. Fear and horror crept into its massive eyes. You only have your own recklessness to blame. Zhongxian muttered impassively as he bent his finger backward, preparing to flick the tiger-bone beast to death and extract its valuable body parts. In that moment, the sky suddenly trembled, and a deafening voice sounded. Zhong Jiuxiao's jade token has been shattered. The first candidate has been eliminated. Remaining candidates, 32. What? Zhong Jiuxiao has been eliminated? Startled, a look of disbelief slowly crept onto Zhongxian's face. 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, 3,000 kilometers. Chapter 1272 Sword Lagoon. While Zhong Jiuxiao's strength was far from on par with his, among the candidates, he could definitely be considered to be above average. On top of that, with the various means he wielded, Zhongxian figured that it should not have been too difficult for him to last till the very end. Yet, to be eliminated barely 10 minutes after arriving on the island. Just who was the one who had made the move? Not to mention, to succeed so quickly. I should check out where he was eliminated. Perhaps, I will be able to find some clues. Tapping his finger, a droplet of blood appeared before Zhongxian's eyes. It was the blood essence that Zhong Jiuxiao had given him previously for him to test his bloodline. Zhongxian formed several hand seals on the blood droplet, and the next moment, the compass in his hand began spinning before eventually pointing in a certain direction. While remote communication artifacts were not allowed on the isolated island, there was no explicit rule preventing him from using blood essence to track the whereabouts of another candidate. The fact that Zhong Jiuxiao had been eliminated shortly after arriving on the island was rather bewildering. He felt that there was something more to the matter, so the matter needed to be investigated immediately. After having a way pointed out, Zhongxian swiftly flitted forward. Seeing the man who was just about to kill it leaving, the tiger-bone beast heaved a quick sigh of relief. It leaped into the depths of the forest and concealed itself, not daring to prowl arrogantly and pounce on others anymore. After flitting for several minutes, covering a distance of almost 200 li, Zhongxian suddenly came to a halt. Zhongxian frowned. Why does it feel like I have been moving in circles? No matter how big the island was, after traveling for so long, the terrain around him should have at least changed. Yet, for some reason, the sight before him looked extremely familiar, as if the road he had been flitting on was a round track. Taking a few steps forward, the truth soon dawned upon Zhongxian. It's a formation. To his astonishment, there was a massive formation on the island. As the sheer area that it covered was too big, even Zhongxian had not noticed its presence at first. To actually be able to avert my detection and trap me, at the very least, this formation must be of grade 8. Currently, Zhongxian's comprehension of formations had already reached 7-star pinnacle. Due to the exceptional prowess of the Heaven's Path formation art, he would be able to easily set up some of the easier grade 8 primary formations. With his proficiency, he should have been able to notice any formation beneath grade 8 with a single glance. Yet, to be able to trap him for such a long period of time before he became aware of its presence, without a doubt, the formation cast over the island had to be grade 8. Eye of insight. Regardless of the grade, as long as it was a formation, he would not have any problems with it. Lines of insight flickered in his eyes as he began assessing his surroundings. Very soon, he found narrow threads of spiritual energy drifting in the area. This should be quasi-grade 8 formation, riverbank beguilement formation. Furthermore, it seems to cover a distance of at least several thousand li. To have such a massive formation set up over this area, just where could this place be? The riverbank beguilement formation was known for its scalability, and it would usually be used to conceal manors or even entire cities, such as the Jingyuan Empire Poison Hall back then. For there to be such a formation here, not to mention, covering several thousand li at that. Just why would there be something like that here? Without several hundred years of effort, it would be impossible to set up a formation of this size. Even Zhongxian would require at least a month of hard work for it. He had initially thought that it was only an ordinary island, but at this point, it was clear that there was something much more to it. However, without much understanding of the Qianchong Empire's history and heritage, it would be difficult for Zhongxian to figure anything out. Shaking his head, he decided to put this matter aside for the moment. Now that I know that it's a formation, the rest will be easy. The riverbank beguilement formation would confuse one's sense of direction, leading one to unwittingly return to the same place over and over again. However, since Zhongxian knew of the existence of the formation, he would not allow himself to be beguiled anymore. He swiftly scanned his surroundings and determined a direction. Then, he moved forward 20 li before side-stepping roughly 14 to 15 li. After which, he changed direction another dozen times before he finally took a step forward. Voila! In that instant, it was as if he had leaped out of some seal. His surroundings were still the same lush forest, but the nature of the spiritual energy around him had changed. It had become a little heavier, carrying a hint of authority and killing intent to them. Sword Qi. Zhongxian's gaze turned grim. He was very familiar with this aura. It was induced by lingering sword qi in an area. Tracing the origin of the aura, Zhongxian swiftly saw that an area of trees collapsed on the ground not too far away. Judging from the clean severing between the tree trunk and the tree stump, it was likely to have been done all in a single sword slash. At the center of the clearing, there were several droplets of fresh blood imprinted on a boulder, and the fact that they had yet to dry up indicated that the battle had occurred recently. Zhongxian frowned. It's Zhong Jiuxiao's blood. He had examined Zhong Jiuxiao's blood before, allowing him to recognize it at a single glance. Given that his blood was splattered there, and there were marks of battle in the area, was that where he had been eliminated by others? Just that. Wasn't the usage of weapons and artifacts disallowed? What was with the sword qi and the clean cuts on the trees in the area? Furthermore, it would be tough for even Zhongxian to sever so many trees within a single sword slash, so when did such a formidable figure appear among the candidates? Eye of insight. Lines of insight emerged in Zhongxian's eyes once more as he swiftly scanned his surroundings. Considering that it had not been long since Zhong Jiuxiao was eliminated, the culprit should not have gotten far yet. He should still be able to track down the culprit by the tracks they had left behind. As he had expected, it did not take long for another surge of sword qi to appear not too far away, directed into the distance. Upon seeing that, Zhongxian immediately dashed over in that direction. However, barely after taking 2 steps, he heard a voice in his ear once more. Kai Yurue's jade token has been shattered. The second candidate has been eliminated. Remaining candidates, 31. He has been eliminated, too? Zhongxian had some recollection of that fellow. A primordial spirit realm pinnacle expert from the Qianyun Empire, Kai Yurue possessed decent fighting prowess and superior. Who would have thought that barely 10 minutes after Zhong Jiuxiao had been eliminated, Kai Yurue would actually be knocked out as well? This was really too fast. Proceeding further, another plot of land filled with cleanly severed trees appeared before Zhongxian's eyes. This time, the sword qi lingering the area was even more devastating. Just by standing there, one would feel as if the air was slicing into one's skin. Perplexed, Zhongxian was just about to continue moving forward to investigate the scene when he suddenly felt something. He immediately took a powerful step backward, and in an instant, he was already 100 meters away. Voila! The sharp sword chi abruptly burst forth from where he had been standing. It flew all the way into the heavens, slicing the air in its path. Wang. Highly alert, Zhongxian saw a sword surging up from the ground. There was a slight aura of disappointment around it, as if unhappy that its surprise assault had failed. Zhongxian was taken aback. It's a primordial spirit realm pinnacle sword? Why would it be here? Upon sensing the assault, his first instinct was that a master teacher had been camping in wait underground, waiting for him to approach to launch a decisive attack. Yet, he never could have imagined that the one springing the assault was actually a saint intermediate tier sword. Just like the Golden Origin Cauldron, the sword also possessed a spirit. Most likely, it had sensed that someone was tracking it, so it had decided to hide itself and launch a preemptive strike. It was fortunate that Zhongxian possessed keen instincts toward danger, allowing him to notice that something was amiss in an instant. Otherwise, if that burst of sword chi had landed on him, even if he had not been injured by it, it would have left him in an unkempt state. Humph! With a displeased look on his face, Zhongxian raised his hand, and a burst of force shot toward the sword. Who? Sensing that the young man before it was going to fight back, the sword unhesitatingly dived back down, intending to return to the safety of the underground world. Trying to flee after attempting to assault me? How can I allow you to get off that easily? Zhongxian sneered. The next moment, the air in the surroundings suddenly became incredibly viscous. As if it had fallen into a pool of mercury, the horrified sword found itself unable to move at all. Come over here. A powerful suction force tugged at the sword. The sword attempted to struggle against the suction force, but severely overpowered, it succumbed after an instant and rapidly flew toward Zhongxian. Catching hold of the sword, Zhongxian swiftly tapped the sword at various points. Wang. With a light buzz, the agitated sword turned gentle in a matter of seconds. Zhongxian had successfully tamed the sword. Were you the one who assaulted Zhong Jiuxiao and Chu Yurue? Zhongxian asked. It wasn't not me. The Dawn Rain Sword did it, the sword replied resoundingly. Dawn Rain Sword? What's your name? Zhongxian was taken aback to hear that there was another sword in the area. Could it be that, other than this sword, there were other Saint Intermediate tier swords in the area as well? I am known as the Dusk Cloud Sword, the sword replied. Dawn Rain, Dusk Cloud. Just from the names, Zhongxian could tell that they were likely a pair of treasured swords. Frowning deeply, he asked, why are you both here? What is this place? Not only was there a powerful formation shrouding the entire island, there were even Saint Intermediate tier swords lying in wait, prepared to assault anyone who crossed them. We have been here since a very long time ago. We are currently at the perimeter of the Sword Lagoon of the Chenchong Empire, the Dusk Cloud Sword replied. Sword Lagoon? Zhongxian was stunned. Back then, Hall Master Xing had tasked him to train the candidates of the Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall in preparation for a friendly spar with 3 other Combat Master Halls, and the prize for the winners in each cultivation tier seemed to be an opportunity to cultivate at the Chenchong Empire Sword Lagoon. Who would have thought that the location for the secondary selection would turn out to be here? Yes. The Sword Lagoon is filled with swords and the sword intent left by countless experts. The truth is that your companions and you carry something that really attracts us a lot, so we can't help but want to attack you all to obtain that item, the Dusk Cloud Sword explained. Something that attracts you a lot. A thought suddenly came to Zhongxian's mind. He flicked his wrist and took out the jade token. Are you referring to this? That's right, it's that item. That item contains a surge of sword intent that is highly beneficial to the growth of our spirit once devoured, the Dusk Cloud Sword exclaimed excitedly. Sword intent. Hearing those words, Zhongxian extended his spiritual perception into the jade token. Just as the Dusk Cloud Sword had said, even though it was extremely faint, the jade token harnessed a Grand Dominion Realm expert's comprehension of swordsmanship, and this lingering trace of sword intent posed an irresistible allure to sword spirits. I see. Zhongxian came to a realization. On the surface, Zhao Xingmo seemed to be pitting the candidates against one another, but in truth, the secondary selection was more complex than that. On top of guarding against their opponents, The candidates also had to defend against the relentless assault of the swords. This was probably the penalty for those who resorted to hiding their token instead of protecting it with their own strength. Zhong Jiuxiao had probably encountered the Dawn Rain sword, and in a moment of carelessness, he had his jade token destroyed, resulting in his elimination. Coming to realize what was going on, Zhong Xian continued his question. Where's the sword lagoon located? How many swords of your tier are there here? Having acknowledged Zhong Xian as its master, the Dusk Cloud sword told him everything that it knew. The sword lagoon is roughly 200 li away from here, and there should probably be at least 100 other swords like me there. 100 other swords like you, as in primordial spirit realm pinnacle swords? Zhong Xian widened his eyes in shock. Primordial spirit realm pinnacle swords were Saint intermediate tier artifacts. Even throughout the entire Qianchong Empire, there would not be too many weapons of such a tier. Yet, for there to be 100 of them there, if he could tame them all, his fighting prowess would soar immensely. The Qianchong Empire Sword Lagoon was left behind by the old sword maestro many years ago. This place contains his heritage and countless sword formations. Every year, countless sword practitioners visit this place, searching for an impetus to further their craft, but so far, no one has succeeded in claiming his heritage. This place is filled with all kinds of sword qi. If one stays here for a prolonged period of time, the influx of different sword intent and sword arts could result in a clash of one's conception of swordsmanship, and for a sword practitioner, that is extremely dangerous. Furthermore, considering how there are people from all walks of life here, it's inevitable that there will be conflicts time to time. As a result, there are many sword practitioners who have ended up losing their lives here. At this point, the voice of the Dusk Cloud sword sank. That is also how the master of the Dawn Rain sword and me died here. 200 li equals 100 kilometers. Chapter 1273 Heaven's Path Sword. Our swords were just a type of weapon, but with many generations of cultivators immersing their entire lives to furthering the way of sword over the course of many years, it had already developed into a complex art with countless paths. Naturally, the method of cultivation for each path also differed vastly from one another. It was precisely for this reason that heritage was extremely important. There were simply too many different sword intent and sword arts within the Sword Lagoon that if one were to attempt to use them as an inspiration to further one's mastery in swordsmanship, putting aside the fact that the divergence in the fundamental principles of each path of swordsmanship would make it very unlikely for one to succeed, the odds were that one's cultivation would go berserk instead. It was also for this reason why the Master-Teacher Pavilion chose to limit the cultivator's access to cultivation technique manuals. Reading just one or two different cultivation technique manuals was still fine, but if exposed to too many cultivation techniques, a cultivator's interpretation of cultivation would be muddled, preventing him from distinguishing which methods of cultivation were feasible for him and which weren't. Once in such a state, the cultivator would be extremely prone to making a wrong step in his cultivation, thus making it highly likely for his cultivation to go berserk. This was also the reason why master teachers had to be selective with what they read. The same principles applied to the Sword Lagoon as well. Those who came here to cultivate might be tempted by the powerful sword arts and sword intent all around them, but if they were to cultivate what they saw without careful selection, it could very well lead to the erosion of the foundation of the swordsmanship path they had built so far. In the long term, not only would it be detrimental to one's growth, they might even lose their lives as well. Bring me over to take a look. Understanding all of these, Zhong Xian said. Yes, the Dusk Cloud sword began leading the way forward. A journey of 200 li was nothing to a primordial spirit realm cultivator. In just a few moments, they had already arrived at their destination. Towering before them were a massive stone wall with the character, sword, inscribed on it. Written with majestic and powerful strokes, it felt as if the character would transform into a burst of sword qi and tear them apart at any moment. What powerful sword intent! Zhong Xian remarked in astonishment. He couldn't clearly discern what level of calligraphy the character before him was at, but just by looking at it from afar, it gave him the impression of an unparalleled expert wielding a sword slashing at him furiously. It felt like no matter how he moved, he wouldn't be able to escape from that slash, as if the attack had been locked upon his soul. This is left behind by the old sword maestro? Zhong Xian asked in astonishment. That's right, the dusk cloud sword replied. The old sword maestro must have achieved an astounding level of mastery in the way of sword in his lifetime. Zhong Xian exclaimed in awe. In his past year of cultivation, he had assimilated quite a number of books relating to sword art, and he had successfully advanced his comprehension of swordsmanship to a considerably high level as well. All along, he thought that even if his comprehension of swordsmanship hadn't reached the peak yet, he still wouldn't lose out to anyone. But through this inscribed character, he could tell that the level of mastery in swordsmanship that the old sword maestro had achieved was far higher than his. The old sword maestro had ground the very essence of the way of sword into his bones, such that even his body had been forged into a sword as well. Otherwise, it was impossible for a casual calligraphy to harness such astoundingly refined sword intent, leaving him feeling a sense of helplessness before it. These are the cultivators who have journeyed here in hopes of comprehending the secrets of the old sword maestro's swordsmanship, the dusk cloud sword as it gestured in a certain direction. Turning his gaze over, Zhong Xian realized that there was a huge crowd of several hundred cultivators gathered beneath the stone wall. Every single one of them was staring intently at the sword character as they emulated its strokes with their fingers. There was an unnaturally focused or even frenzied look in their eyes, almost as if they had gone mad. What you said is all wrong. My move has to be correct. Look, a voice sounded. From the direction where the voice sounded, a middle-aged man flicked his wrist in a beautiful arc, and a surge of sword chi burst forward. It slashed everything within several hundred meters of its path before gradually dissipating. This is upper sword heart? Zhong Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. Proficiency in swordsmanship could mainly be divided into two stages, sword intent and sword heart. Most sword practitioners should be able to comprehend sword intent upon reaching transcendent mortal. Those who were slightly more talented might be able to comprehend sword heart, inducing the phenomenon call of the myriad swords, roar of the dragon. Sword heart, as the name suggested, referred to wielding one's heart like a sword, drawing out the true prowess of the way of sword through their will. Every single strike made by a sword practitioner who had achieved sword heart would be a sword art in itself. This state was also otherwise termed as man-sword union. Only those who harbored spirit and heart in their sword would be able to reach this realm. Sword heart could be further divided into three tiers, namely lower sword heart, middle sword heart, and upper sword heart. For saint cultivators, even just achieving middle sword heart would already make them top-notch experts. Yet, the middle-aged man had actually comprehended upper sword heart. One must know that so far, Zhong Xian had only comprehended upper sword heart as well. In other words, in terms of proficiency in the way of sword, the middle-aged man was nowhere weaker than Zhong Xian. That's not right. That crux of the move lies in overwhelming one's enemy, so the focus of it should be in the relentless barrage of sword chi. You're focusing all of your strength within a surge of sword chi is clearly erroneous. Look at mine. In his moment of shock, an old man beside the middle-aged man shook his head in stern disapproval before he whipped out a sword and flicked it. In the blink of an eye, a cold and forbidding aura permeated an area of several dozen meters around the old man, and a storm of sword chi filled the surroundings. It felt like anyone who dared step into the area, no matter how powerful, would be trapped for life. He has comprehended upper sword heart as well? Zhong Xian was startled once more. It was already frightening to see that a cultivator had comprehended upper sword heart, but to think that the old man would also be another such person as well. In fact, it seemed like the old man had a deeper and more profound understanding of the way of sword than the middle-aged man before. Wrong. The both of you are utterly wrong. It should be like this. A third man joined in the commotion, and he executed a powerful sword art which utilized sword chi like thin threads that weaved around the surroundings, forming something reminiscent to a mist. Similarly, this third man has also comprehended upper sword heart. Completely dumbstruck, Zhong Xian turned to look at the rest of the crowd. Every single one of them seemed to harness a cold and sharp aura within their bodies, as if they were the very embodiment of swords themselves. These several hundred men have all comprehended upper sword heart? Zhong Xian gulped down a mouthful of saliva. In his long journey, He had never seen a single cultivator whose swordsmanship was on par or superior to his. Yet, in the blink of an eye, he found himself faced with several hundred of such cultivators. Really, as expected of the famed Sword Lagoon, it sure was a fearsome place. They are the itinerant cultivator, master teachers, and combat masters from the various different empires or even the Empire Alliance. Some of them have already spent more than 900 years here. And with 900 years of accumulation, the least they should do is to achieve upper sword heart, the Dusk Cloud Sword replied. 900 years. Zhong Xian was startled for a moment before slowly nodding. It was already nearing a year since he had come over to this world, but in terms of the duration he had dedicated to learning swordsmanship, the total time probably wouldn't even add up to a single day yet. There were plenty of experts in the 8 conferred empires, and with 900 years of hard work behind them, it wasn't too surprising that there would be so many individuals who commanded the same level of mastery in swordsmanship as him. After all, it was not like he was some kind of unparalleled genius. Putting all aside, he couldn't even defeat his own clone. Wait. You mean that these men spent 900 years sitting in front of the stone wall, contemplating over swordsmanship? This single character is already enough for them to study it for their entire life. As sword fanatics, they couldn't resist the allure of the intrigue contained in the character, and this only made them determined to decipher the secrets behind it. As a result, most of them end up never leaving the Sword Lagoon. Hi. Zhong Xian sighed. He suddenly remembered a book he had read in his previous life. In the story, there was an island that contained unparalleled secret manuals. Each year's Laba festival, there would be a huge number of martial artists venturing to the island, only to never return. The situation was somewhat similar to what he was seeing at the moment. There was no one restricting their movement, but obsessed with furthering their swordsmanship, they failed to realize that their entire life was flying past their eyes. Utter nonsense. It's apparent that my interpretation is correct. Your direction has been wrong from the very start, so how could your interpretation possibly be right? My interpretation is the one that's correct. All of you are wrong. Since none of you are willing to admit it, why don't we settle it with a fight? Voila. After a long round of argument, none of the trio was willing to concede to the other. Eventually, they drew their swords on one another and began on an intense fight. Actually, they have already gone berserk. Zhong Xian shook his head. No matter how profound the sword character was, the fact that these people were no longer able to control themselves anymore, even clashing with one another over something as minor as that, meant that their rationality had already been eroded. They had already lost sense of self, and that was no different from going berserk. Amidst Zhong Xian's lamentation, the battle among the trio had finally concluded. 2 of them were severely injured in the encounter, and the final victor walked out of the battle with a confused look on his eyes. He couldn't help but doubt if his comprehension of swordsmanship was wrong, or else how could the other 2 be almost as powerful as him? The many years of devotion to nothing but swordsmanship had already eroded their rational judgment. Under such circumstances, no words could possibly sway them anymore. Sighing deeply, Zhong Xian tore his gaze away from them to assess the massive character on the stone wall once more. Inscribed using sword qi, the character harnessed the conception of the carver. Each stroke of the character was imbued a powerful yet unique aura, seemingly the manifestation of a sword art. The aura of these individual strokes harmonized with one another to grant an imposing yet unfathomable meaning to the formed character. It's no wonder why these people would abandon their all and devote all of their life to deciphering the character. With just a look, Zhong Xian could already feel a slight jolt in his mind urging him to cultivate according to the character. Shaking his head, he slowly closed his eyes. It was not that his mind wasn't resilient enough to withstand the allure of the profound sword arts contained within the character, but the sword arts contained within the character were simply riddled with too many flaws. It was hard for him to even continue looking at it straight in the eye. What are these? Exhaling deeply, Zhong Xian tossed aside the miscellaneous thoughts in his mind and opened his eyes once more. In the next moment, he noticed that there were countless scribblings in the perimeter of the stone wall. These are the sword intent and sword arts that countless generations of sword practitioners have comprehended from the character. If you find yourself unable to grasp the meaning of sword on the wall, you can use them as references. The dusk cloud sword said. I see. Zhong Xian nodded. Taking a brief sweep, it seemed like there were at least 1,000 of such insights scribbled all over the place. This does resemble the Saint Ascension platform, Zhong Xian noted. The road up to the Saint Ascension platform was filled with insights as well. Every single individual felt that they were the person chosen by the heavens to comprehend the true meaning of Kongshi's writing, but in truth their interpretation was riddled with flaws, a manifestation of their ignorance. These insights scribbled around the stone wall were likely to be the same as well. Flaws. Sweeping his gaze across the area, many books swiftly materialized one after another in the Library of Heaven's Path. These insights could be considered to be sword art manuals as well, allowing Zhong Xian to collect them with a sweep of his eyes. After collecting all of the insights, Zhong Xian gathered the 1,000 of books together and muttered, "Compile." They swiftly merged together into a single book. Casually flipping it open, Zhong Xian's eyes lit up. It's a Heaven's Path sword art. He had done this set of actions on a whim, not really expecting to gain any gains out of it. Yet, who could have thought that the compilation of insights from the many generations of sword practitioners would actually form a perfect Heaven's Path sword art? Zhong Xian swiftly went through the compiled Heaven's Path sword art in his mind. It must be said that the heritage which the old sword maestro had left behind was truly profound. If he were to cultivate the compiled Heaven's Path sword art, his comprehension of the way of sword could be brought to another level. Just as Zhong Xian was about to close his eyes to cultivate, he suddenly felt the surrounding spiritual energy surging forward, gathering to an area just ahead of him. It didn't take long for the massive influx of spiritual energy to create something reminiscent of a whirlpool. Quickly turning his gaze over, he saw that the crowd cultivating before the stone wall had also turned their heads over toward the commotion as well. Master! Just as Zhong Xian was about to head over to check what was going on, he suddenly saw the dusk cloud sword trembling non-stop, as if it couldn't control its body anymore. What's wrong? Zhong Xian asked with a frown. Master, someone has grasped a higher realm in the way of sword. As a sword spirit, I can't help but be compelled to submit to him. Grasped a higher realm of the way of sword. Taken aback, Zhong Xian quickly scanned the area in front, and there, he saw a young man seated cross-legged on the ground. An incredibly sharp sword chi burst forth from his body, as if heralding the arrival of an unparalleled sword into the world. Is that Ma Minghai? Upon taking a closer look at the young man, Zhong Xian frowned. It was no other than the genius of the Qianchong Empire who had challenged him over the Tianchen brew back in the Master-Teacher Pavilion, Ma Minghai. Why would he be here? Zhong Xian frowned. 100 kilometers. Chapter 1274. The strong can do as they please. While the other candidates were busy avoiding being eliminated or eliminating others, this fellow actually sat right in front of the stone wall to cultivate. Furthermore, from the looks of it, it seemed like he had already been there for quite a while. Such a bizarre decision left Zhong Xian slightly bewildered. Soon, Zhong Xian came to a realization. He's a genius from the Qianchong Empire, and he specializes in swordsmanship. I had to capture the Dusk Cloud Sword in order to find out where this is, but there's a good chance that he realized that we are in the Sword Lagoon as soon as he opened his eyes. As a sword practitioner of the Qianchong Empire, it was likely that Ma Minghai had been there before. Given so, it would not have been too surprising for him to know his way around the area. Hong Long Long. At this moment, boundless sword intent and sword chi suddenly converged on Ma Minghai, and in an instant, his aura surged swiftly. Wang. Unable to control it any longer, the dusk cloud sword lowered itself onto the ground, trembling non-stop. It could feel the absolute authority that the wielder of that powerful aura had over it, and it dared not oppose him. Looking at the sky filled with sword chi, as well as the sword in his hand that was submitting to the young man before him, the elder was overwhelmed with agitation. That's sword quintessence. It has been a whole 700 years. I never thought that I would see such a sight once more. No, it isn't sword quintessence, an elder beside him refuted. Those who have truly achieved the level of sword quintessence would be able to induce the servility of the myriad swords, but that young man has only received the deference of the swords. If I'm not mistaken, that should be half quintessence. Indeed, it's half quintessence. Most cultivators are only aware that swordsmanship can be divided into sword intent and sword heart, oblivious to the fact that there's sword quintessence above them. Upon mastering this realm, as long as the strength of a sword is beneath one, the sword will obey one's commands unconditionally. The young man is only able to get the swords to submit to him, but he hasn't reached the level of having them obey his commands unconditionally. Given so, he should only be at half quintessence. Even if it's just half quintessence, isn't that the breakthrough that we have all been working hard for? Indeed. 700 years ago, when Sword of Faint Whispers, Ji Lingzhen, achieved a breakthrough to this realm, I happened to be around and witnessed the miraculous event with my own eyes. Who could have known that I would have the luck to encounter another half-quintessence breakthrough just before my life comes to an end? Ji Lingzhen. If I recall correctly, he has not left the Sword Lagoon ever since he made the breakthrough to half-quintessence, right? He has not. He chose to venture deeper into the Sword Lagoon in hopes of obtaining the old Sword Maestro's heritage. It's just a pity that he hasn't succeeded yet. I wonder if he's still alive after all these years. Such discussions could be heard amid the crowd. Half quintessence. Hearing the words of the crowd, Zhong Xian nodded slowly. With a slight stroke of his hand, the crouching dusk cloud sword suddenly felt the pressure crushing his soul vanish without a trace, and it quickly struggled back into the air. Its slight shivering every now and then seemed to indicate its deep fear and apprehension over what had just happened. A sword quintessence expert wielded a natural dominance over all sword spirits, forcing all sword spirits to bow before them. For Ma Minghai to achieve this level at such a young age, his aptitude for swordsmanship was truly astounding. It was no wonder he had been chosen as a candidate to enter the Sanctum of Sages. Compared to Ma Minghai, Zhong Zhouxiao was truly lacking. Hoo. After absorbing all of the sword qi into his body, Ma Minghai's eyes gradually opened. Voila! His eyes were extremely sharp, and it felt as if one could be sliced in two under his gaze. Even though his cultivation was still only at quasi-leaving aperture realm, yet to undergo the lightning tribulation, his zhenqi felt much more condensed than before. It seemed like even if the lightning tribulation fell upon him at that very moment, he would have been able to slice it in two with a flick of his blade. Ma Minghai slowly stood up and stretched his stiff muscles with a delighted look on his face. At this moment, he suddenly caught sight of a familiar figure standing not too far away, and his eyes narrowed. Zhong Xian. A day ago, he had exchanged blows with the other party. He had executed one of his trump cards, Sea of 1,000 Blades, which the other party had simply swallowed in a single mouthful, even returning to him right after. Without a doubt, the other party was the strongest rival he had ever come across. Back then, he had even resolved himself to use his ultimate technique to defeat the other party, but due to Pavilion Master Yu's intervention, he had been left with no choice but to drop the matter. After which, the other party had challenged Pavilion Master Yu with his puppets. While the other party did manage to achieve victory in the end, it was only through the vast number of puppets he had in his possession. That did not represent the other party's true strength. If he were to pair his quasi-leaving aperture realm cultivation together with his newfound strength as a half-quintessence expert, putting aside defeating Zhong Xian, even killing him should not pose much of a problem at all. Thus, a sharp glint flashed through Ma Minghai's eyes as he stepped forward. You have really come at an untimely moment. You just had to appear here right after I achieved my breakthrough. It seems like even the heavens are asking me to eliminate you. Who? With a swift maneuver, he stepped up to Zhong Xian and said, Zhongshe, we meet again. Yeah, we meet again, Zhong Xian replied casually. While I am in awe of your strength, it's a pity that we are in a selection match at the moment. The slots to the Sanctum of Sages are on the line, so, will you take out the jade token yourself, or do you need me to make a move? Gazing at Zhong Xian coldly, Ma Minghai spoke in a domineering voice that allowed for no opposition. Take it out yourself, and you can at least spare yourself some pain. Otherwise, even if I'm not allowed to kill you, I have plenty of ways to temporarily incapacitate. And if you get killed by saint beasts while you are immobilized, I'm afraid that you will only have your own bad luck to blame then. Are you threatening me? Zhongxian looked at Ma Minghai with narrowed eyes. Threat? This isn't a threat. I'm just stating a fact. It's just the natural order of the world. The weak have to bow to the strong. Ma Minghai sneered coldly. Staring at Ma Minghai intently, Zhongxian asked, do you mean to say that the strong can do as they please? Indeed, the strong can do as they please, Ma Minghai replied with a smirk. He had felt deeply humiliated by the crushing defeat he had suffered against Zhongxian. It would have been one thing if it had been a close match with one another, but the vast disparity in strength between them was truly completely unacceptable to him. This had left frustration and anger boiling within him. Furthermore, shortly after that, the young man dared insult Pavilion Master Yu. As a member of the Qianchong Empire Master-Teacher Pavilion, he could not swallow seeing an outsider treating their pavilion head with such disrespect. It was not easy for him to turn the tables around, so naturally, he wanted to make use of this chance to get even with the other party for those two matters. Very well then. Seeing how confident Ma Minghai was, Zhongxian shook his head and sighed. Since you have already said so much, pardon me then. After saying those words, Zhongxian channeled his zhenqi into his palm and thrust it toward Ma Minghai. Seeing how the young man had chosen to struggle against him instead of surrendering, Ma Minghai scoffed in disdain. Do you think that you stand a chance against me in your current state? With a flick of his finger, he sent a surge of sword qi toward Zhongxian. His comprehension of swordsmanship had already reached half quintessence. Even without just using a sword, he could easily defeat an opponent of the same power level as him with the sword qi in his body. Let alone a mere primordial spirit realm intermediate stage cultivator. At this moment, Ma Minghai suddenly noticed something. When he fought with the other party the previous day, the other party had still been at primordial spirit realm intermediate stage. However, at this moment, why did it seem like his cultivation had risen to primordial spirit realm pinnacle? Did he advance 2 cultivation stages in a single day? It makes no difference whether he's at intermediate stage or pinnacle. Against the current me, the only fate that lies in wait for him is death. Ma Minghai shrugged the matter off casually as he watched the burst of sword qi he had shot previously dashing toward Zhongxian. While Ma Minghai was still confident that his sword qi would be able to tear through the other party's palm strike with ease, the two finally collided with one another. However, contrary to his expectations, his sword qi actually dissipated instantaneously, as if a blob of tofu crashing into a wall of steel. Caught off guard by the abrupt turn of events, Ma Minghai narrowed his eyes in shock. As someone whose mastery of swordsmanship was at half quintessence, he knew full well how much strength was packed into that burst of sword qi. Even the companion he had been very close with, Brother Sun, would not dare clash directly with it. Yet, the young man before him had been able to easily dissipate his sword qi with just a simple palm strike. Just how could this be? But this was not the end of Ma Minghai's bewilderment yet. The remaining might of the palm strike continued charging forth toward him with astounding momentum, appearing before him in the blink of an eye. Pang! An overwhelming pressure assaulted Ma Minghai, causing his face to pale. He immediately tried to put up his defense to defend against the palm strike, to no avail. He crashed heavily into a massive boulder, and a stifled feeling in his chest made him cough out a mouthful of blood. How could this be? How can you be so powerful? Ma Minghai widened his eyes in disbelief. He felt that the main reason he had lost to Zhongxian earlier was because he had to suppress his cultivation. Now that his cultivation was not suppressed, and he had even comprehended half quintessence, it would really be an eye-opener if he was defeated. It must be a coincidence, it must be. There's no way you can possibly be that powerful. There's just no way. Rising to his feet, Ma Minghai drew out a half moon in front of his chest before shooting it forth. Sword qi in the area, heed my command. Upon his shouting, the sword qi drifting aimlessly in the region swiftly converged together to form a massive sword of roughly 10 meters long in front of Ma Minghai's chest. Having comprehended half quintessence, even if he was unable to earn the absolute obedience of swords, it was still well within his means to control sword qi in the air. The sword lagoon was filled with sword practitioners, resulting in a massive congregation of sword qi in the area. In other words, the area was almost like a haven for those who had comprehended half-quintessence. In his current state, Ma Minghai would be able to slay even true leaving aperture realm cultivators easily. This is the strength of those who have comprehended swordsmanship to half-quintessence. How fearsome. To be able to control sword chi, he's practically invincible in the sword lagoon. Indeed. That fellow facing him is doomed. The crowd in the area analyzed the situation grimly. As sword practitioners themselves, they understood how fearsome a cultivator who had comprehended half-quintessence was. Wielding the strength to manipulate and release a barrage of sword chi at will, they were unmatched in their power class. The young man facing Ma Minghai was only a primordial spirit realm pinnacle, so how could he possibly withstand Ma Minghai's strength? Voila! Before everyone's apprehensive gaze, the massive sword forged solely out of sword chi began flying toward Zhongxian with incredible momentum. It was even faster than the speed of sound, and it appeared right before Zhongxian in just the blink of an eye. If that technique landed, no matter how sturdy a body one had, one would instantly be sliced in two and die on the spot. The attack you have launched through gathering the surrounding sword chi is indeed formidable, but it's a pity that the sword chi is not yours. In the face of that devastating attack, there was not the slightest hint of anxiety or fear to be seen on Zhongxian's face. On the contrary, disappointment was written all over his face instead. Shaking his head, Zhongxian casually tapped his finger forward, and a powerful ray of light burst right through the sword, dissipating it instantaneously. Go, Zhongxian muttered as he flicked his finger lightly. Peng! Ma Minghai flew back once more. His back crashed heavily into the stone wall, creating a massive depression in it. To make matters worse, when he tried to struggle out of the stone wall, for some reason, he found that his body simply would not budge, and this left him deeply terrified. Why you? With a ghastly pale face, Ma Minghai stared at the young man before him with horrified eyes. He had thought that as long as he fought with his full strength, he would be able to subdue the young man easily. But it turned out that he had been too naive. Even with his heightened strength, that monster of a young man was actually able to subdue him with just a single finger. Even when he had borrowed the strength from the massive congregation of sword chi in the surroundings, he had found that he was still completely helpless before that young man. With a look of utter disbelief, he watched as the young man gracefully walked up to him with a frighteningly radiant smile on his face. While I am in awe of your strength, it's a pity that we are in a selection match at the moment. The slots to the Sanctum of Sages are on the line, so, will you take out the jade token yourself, or do you need me to make a move? Hearing those words, Ma Minghai's face immediately turned red. Those were the very words that he had told the young man earlier, and the latter was returning all of them to him. You want to take my jade token? Unless you plan on killing me, dream on. Ma Minghai spat with gritted teeth. The destruction of his jade token would mean that he lost the slot to enter the Sanctum of Sages. This was his greatest opportunity to rise to the top of the master-teacher continent, and he could not let all of the hard work he had put into it go to waste. Kill you? There's no need to go through that much trouble. Gazing down on Ma Minghai, Zhongxian chuckled softly as he snapped his finger. Peng! It was as if a massive mountain had suddenly fallen upon Ma Minghai, crushing him deeper and deeper into the stone wall. This immense pressure seemed to squeeze whatever oxygen he had out of his lungs, threatening to choke him to death. Wait a moment. The fear in Ma Minghai's eyes intensified. He anxiously spoke up to plead for mercy, but he found that even spitting out a word was a great strain on him in his current state. My apologies, I don't have a habit of giving my opponents the chance to counterattack, Zhongxian replied with a bright smile. Besides, there is one thing that you spoke of that I can deeply relate to. The strong can indeed do as they please. Chapter 1275 Chaotic Palace Beguilement Formation Jeji. Ma Minghai's bones creaked under the immense pressure, threatening to shatter at any moment. His body also swiftly approached its limit as redness consumed his skin. If the other party hadn't made a move on him, Zhongxian wouldn't have bothered to make a move either. However, since the other party had chosen to provoke him, he saw no need to go easy on the other party either. Let go of me. I'll give you my jade token. Sensing that he wouldn't be able to survive long in this state, Ma Minghai gathered all of his strength in order to yell out those words. Very well. Zhongxian retracted his hands and placed them behind his back. Pada. Finally released from the stone wall, Ma Minghai had to take several deep breaths before he was able to calm himself down. A hint of savagery flashed across his eyes and he discreetly whipped out 2 swords. With a powerful fling of his hands, he threw them right toward Zhongxian. Astonishingly, these 2 swords were at Saint Intermediate tier as well. Further enhanced by his half-quintessence sword intent, they surged forward at an astounding speed. According to the rules of the secondary selection, the candidates were forbidden from using their artifacts against one another in the secondary selection. Ma Minghai knew the rules, but he also understood very well that he wouldn't be a match for Zhongxian without using his sword, and he was already at the brink of being eliminated as well. Given so, he could only take a gamble and pray that Zhao Xingmo wouldn't find out about the matter. Sila. The 2 powerful blades tore across the air, and before one could even see them, they were already right before Zhongxian. Just as Ma Minghai thought that he would be able to slay that fellow, the latter's exasperated voice suddenly sounded in the air. Hi, it seems like I really am too good-natured. Had it been anyone else, you would have already been killed several times over for what you have done. Hong Long. Before Ma Minghai could process what had just happened, his body was suddenly flung backward, crashing heavily back into the stone wall. Under the overwhelming impact of the collision, his bones finally gave in and shattered. At the same time, the severe internal injuries he had sustained caused fresh blood to spurt out of his mouth. If you won't hold to the end of your promise, I guess I'll just have to take your jade token myself. Following which, Ma Minghai suddenly felt a tearing pain on his finger. His storage ring had been forcefully taken away, and it flew straight into Zhongxian's palm. You! Ma Minghai's face reddened in anxiety. However, it was already too late for him to do or say anything. With a tap of his finger, Zhongxian took out the jade token from the storage ring and flicked it lightly. Catcher! The jade token shattered into powdery remains. It seems like Qianchong Empire does value you quite a bit. There's plenty of treasures in your storage ring. Good. I'll be taking them as your compensation then. Zhongxian had intended to let Ma Minghai off with just crushing his jade token, but since the other party was so shameless as to attempt a surprise assault after being defeated, he was no longer willing to let the other party off without making him pay some price for his actions. Pu. On the other hand, watching as Zhongxian placed his storage ring into his pocket, another mouthful of fresh blood spurted from Ma Minghai's mouth. He had to go through a lot of effort in order to procure all those valuable resources in his storage ring, and to have them snatched away just like that. In his moment of despair, Ma Minghai heard the other party continuing on, "These swords of yours seem to be Saint Intermediate tier artifacts as well. Not bad, not bad. I'll be taking them as interest payment. I have nurtured my swords with my blood essence over a long period of time, so the spirits within them are completely loyal to me. Even if you take them, there's no way you will be able to make them submit to you." Seeing that his swords were about to be taken away, Ma Minghai spat through gritted teeth. He had spent a hefty sum to nurture those 2 swords of his, so he was certain of their loyalty toward him. As long as he was alive, there was no way they would betray him. But before Ma Minghai could finish his words, he suddenly saw Zhongxian tapping his swords at various points, and all of a sudden, his swords joyfully rushed forward to the latter and bowed respectfully. Pu. Another spurt of blood escaped from Ma Minghai's mouth, and the despair on his face deepened. He thought that with his newfound strength, he should be able to overwhelm Zhongxian easily and exact his vengeance. Yet, who could have thought that the opponent he had pitted himself against would actually be a monster in disguise? Alright, I'm done. After taking Ma Minghai's items, Zhongxian couldn't be bothered to waste his time on the other party anymore. Thus, he released his grip on the other party, and the other party fell from the stone wall. Hong Long. Shortly after Ma Minghai was released, a voice sounded across the entire island, "Ma Minghai's jade token has been shattered. The second candidate has been eliminated. Remaining candidates, 30. Kuala." Not long after those words were spoken, an aerial saint beast descended from the sky to fetch Ma Minghai before flying off into the distance. Zhong Jiuxiao should have been taken away as well then. Zhongxian nodded in realization. That explained why he wasn't able to find Zhong Zhouxiao despite following the latter's track. It seemed like he had already been brought out of the island. I understand how Zhao Xingmo is able to sense the elimination of a candidate through the dissipation of the sword intent within the Jade token, but how does he manage to locate individual candidates, sending an aerial saint beast over to fetch them so swiftly? Could Zhao Xingmo really have the ability to perceive everything that has happened on the island? Zhongxian frowned in incomprehension. Based on his estimates, the island had to be at least 2,000 to 3,000 li in diameter, and it would be impossible for anyone to cover this entire area with their spiritual perception. Since that was the case, how could Zhao Xingmo possibly keep track of everything that was happening here at all times? He must be using some kind of artifact or medium to uphold an intelligence network over the entire island. Zhongxian analyzed. With this thought in mind, he activated the Eye of Insight and focused his sight on the aerial saint beast which had just flown away. This look unveiled the mystery behind Zhao Xingmo's seeming omniscience over the island. Oh, think that it would just be myriad ants. Zhongxian couldn't help but burst into laughter. Perhaps the simpler the truth was, the easier it was to be blindsided by it. After all the time he had spent wondering what kind of means Zhao Xingmo could have used to watch over the entire island, it turned out to just be myriad ant. Due to the small stature of myriad ants, they were able to conceal themselves easily amidst trees and bushes, making it nigh impossible for even keen-eyed master teachers to notice their presence. Zhongxian had used the exact same method to scout the cloud mist ridge back then too. He really didn't think that Zhao Xingmo would use such a method to look over the secondary selection. Since he was using myriad ants as his scout, there should also be a myriad anthive queen under the other party's command too. Anthive queen, is there any way you can drive away the myriad ants observing me? Zhongxian communicated with the myriad anthive queen telepathically. He understood that Zhao Xingmo had to keep a tight watch over the entire field as the invigilator, but he still felt a little uncomfortable at the thought of being constantly spied on. While these myriad ants aren't my children, I still do have the ability to drive them away. However, I only fear that Zhao Shi would notice an anomaly if I were to drive them away. The myriad anthive queen replied. That's true. Zhongxian rubbed his glabella in frustration. Zhao Xingmo had to maintain his watch over the secondary selection so as to keep up to date with the circumstances of each and every candidate. If Zhongxian's presence were to suddenly disappear from his sight, there was a good chance that Zhao Xingmo might personally head over to check on the situation. Alternatively, I think that I might be able to tame some of the myriad ants and have them obey my commands. After a moment of silence, the myriad anthive queen proposed. You are able to tame the myriad ants? That would be perfect. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Naturally, it would be better to tame the myriad ants than to chase them away. This way, he would be able to control the information that the myriad ants were reporting to Zhao Xingmo about, thus allowing him to fake his position without incurring the latter's suspicion. I'll leave that to you then, Zhongxian said as he released the myriad anthive queen in the area with a flick of his hand. After which, he turned his attention back to the stone wall before him. Having witnessed how easily Ma Minghai was defeated, the sword practitioners gathered around the stone wall had all retreated a distance away from Zhongxian, fearing that they would accidentally offend him. Zhongxian couldn't be bothered to waste his time on them either. Just as he was about to return back to cultivating his Heaven's Path sword art, the Dusk Cloud sword suddenly flew over and said, Master, since you are that powerful, do you want to try challenging the Sword Lagoon? I think that there is a good chance you might be able to acquire the heritage. Challenge the Sword Lagoon? Aren't we at the Sword Lagoon at the moment? Zhongxian asked in bewilderment. Considering the sheer amount of sword chi and sword intent that were drifting in the area, where else could currently be at if not the Sword Lagoon? We are currently only at the outer perimeters of the Sword Lagoon. The true Sword Lagoon lies behind the stone wall. The heritage of the old sword maestro lies within there as well, the Dusk Cloud sword said. Oh! Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. Are the 100 Saint intermediate tier swords you have mentioned earlier located beyond the stone wall as well? That's right, the Dusk Cloud sword replied. Bring me over to take a look. Having a compiled Heaven's Path sword art sitting in the library of Heaven's Path, the heritage of the old sword maestro held little attraction to Zhongxian. However, if he could acquire 100 Saint Intermediate tier swords out of this, that would really be a huge gain. Even 100 Saint low tier sabers were sufficient to crush the boss of the underground black market. If he could acquire 100 Saint Intermediate tier swords, he would be able to destroy Pavilion Master Yu easily with them even without resorting to his puppet. In fact, he might even be able to rival Zhao Xingmo in a battle. The Dusk Cloud sword delightfully led Zhongxian around the massive stone wall, and very soon, they arrived at the boundary of a land shrouded with mist. The mist seemed to have been the result of some kind of formidable formation, completely blocking the sight of whatever that lay ahead. Realizing that he didn't recognize the formation, Zhongxian frowned. Flaws. Hula. A book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. As the formation was currently in operation, the Library of Heaven's Path was able to compile a book on it. Chaotic Palace Beguilement Formation, a Grade 8 formation? Reading the content on the book, Zhongxian was startled. It was no wonder why no one had obtained the heritage this far. It was actually guarded by a Grade 8 formation. A Grade 8 formation could only be set up or deciphered by a Grand Dominion realm expert, and there was no one in Chenchong Empire who possessed the strength to do so. In no hurry to step into the formation, Zhongxian turned to the Dusk Cloud sword and asked, "Have you entered the Sword Lagoon before?" "I haven't entered it before, but I heard that the old sword maestro's personal sword and heritage lie in there," the Dusk Cloud sword replied. "The old sword maestro's personal sword?" Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. UN. According to the rumors I have heard, the old sword maestro's personal sword is a Saint high-tier artifact, and even the Emperor of Chenchong Empire is dying to lay his hands on it. However, it's a pity that no one has been able to bypass the formation, let alone find the sword, the Dusk Cloud sword said. A Saint high-tier artifact? Zhongxian tightened his fist in agitation. Even at the very minimum, a Saint high-tier artifact would possess strength equivalent to a Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion realm cultivator. There was actually such a formidable weapon in the Sword Lagoon? That's right. To be honest with you, most of the sword chi lingering in the area was emanated by the old sword maestro's personal sword. While those sword practitioners are attempting to decipher it in order to raise their mastery of swordsmanship, more than that, they wanted to acquire the old sword maestro's heritage and obtain his personal sword through it, the Dusk Cloud sword explained. It had been on this island for quite a long while now, so he was well aware of the affairs that happened here. Since there's such a weapon here, I really should take a good look in the Sword Lagoon then, Zhongxian thought in excitement. Unless in large quantities, otherwise even Saint Intermediate tier artifacts weren't of much use to him anymore. However, this was different for Saint high-tier artifacts. With a Saint high-tier sword in hand, he was confident of defeating Zhao Xingmo even. With such a weapon at hand, he would be in a far better position to challenge the Zhong clan for Luo Ruoxin's hand in marriage. "You should wait outside for the time being," Zhongxian instructed. Yes, the Dusk Cloud sword nodded before standing completely still on the spot. After which, Zhongxian unhesitatingly turned around and ventured into the mist. The flaws of the formation was recorded in its corresponding book compiled in the Library of Heaven's Path, so this Grade 8 formation no longer posed any secret to him. After advancing ahead for some time, the area before Zhongxian abruptly opened up. The mist had vanished, revealing a stream and a wooden hut instead. Oh! To think that there would a piece of tranquil land in the middle of the Sword Lagoon. Surprised, Zhongxian slowly made his way over to the wooden hut. Just as he was about to open the door to the wooden hut, his body suddenly stiffened. With a swift maneuver, his silhouette vanished on the spot, appearing at a distance of 100 meters away. Voila! A burst of sword chi sliced through the area where he was previously standing on, leaving behind a dark gorge in its wake. Chapter 1276 Insane Demon Breakthrough Pill. This burst of sword chi was extremely powerful. Ma Minghai's attacks appeared to be nothing in comparison. Alarmed, Zhongxian assessed the situation before him warily. Even with his strength, if not for his sharp instincts prompting him to avoid in advance, he could have been sliced in two by that burst of sword chi. Just who in the world was in the wooden hut? Jia. The door opened, and a figure slowly walked out. Zhong Xian's eyebrows shot up. The boss of the underground black market? It was none other than the person whom he had 100 Saint Lotier sabers pummel back in the ring of death. But why would he appear here? The other party had mostly recovered from the wounds he had suffered back in the encounter with Zhong Xian, but from the glaring scars that crawled all over his body like innumerable centipedes, one could still fathom the tragic plight he had once been in. The boss of the black market, Ji Lingfeng, glared at Zhong Xian with deep hatred in his eyes. Zhong Xian, you have manipulated my rules, humiliated me, and snatched my wealth. For that, I shall personally execute you today. While the black market was known to be a lawless zone, the truth was that it was only subjected to a different set of laws, set solely by the boss of the black market. Regardless of whether one was a master teacher or a combat master, one would have to obey the new set of rules in there. Yet, this fellow actually disregarded the rules in place and raised a huge commotion, severely injuring him even. If he let the other party go, how could he re-establish his dominance and authority in the black market in the future? You knew that I would be here for the secondary selection, so you lay in wait for me? Zhong Xian asked with narrowed eyes. The only ones who should have known that the secondary selection would be held in the Sword Lagoon were only Zhao Xingmo and Pavilion Master Yu. For the other party to be lying in wait for him here, could it have been that the other party already knew of his whereabouts in advance? Even with the vast intelligence network of the black market, it should have been impossible for them to uncover the location of the secondary selection on such short notice. So, for the other party to have been hiding within the formation all this while, waiting to launch an assault on him, that could only mean one thing. I'll tell you after you go to hell. Ji Lingfeng bellowed furiously as he flung his sword furiously, sending another burst of sword qi toward Zhong Xian. His sword was only 3 kai long, but it emanated bone-chilling coldness. Even before the sharp burst of sword qi could arrive, an eerie sound reminiscent of the resentful mutterings of the departed echoed in the air, placing those who heard it in a distraught state. Feeling a sudden bout of dizziness striking his head, Zhong Xian's eyes narrowed. A demonic tune. All along, he had been using this trick against others. He did not expect others to use it against him, and in a moment of carelessness, he was placed into an unnatural state of mind. Even so, with his soul depth of 25.1, a level comparable to 8-star high-tier master teachers, he was able to shake out of his unnatural state in just an instant. However, as soon as his unnatural state was dispelled, the sword qi was already right before his face. The sharp gale that rose from the movement left a slightly piercing sensation on his skin, leaving him feeling as if a blade was slowly sinking into his body. Who? Zhong Xian immediately flitted away from the spot, appearing 100 meters away in an instant. Unbounded Voyager. After learning the second dan of Heavenly Art of Dimension Unravel, his comprehension of the Unbounded Voyager had deepened, allowing him to move at greater speed. By driving his strength to its limit, he was capable of making near-instantaneous movements in desperate situations. At this point, Zhong Xian realized that his back was completely drenched with sweat. It was fortunate that he had reacted with time, or else that attack would have gouged out a huge hole in his chest. Do you think that I will allow you to flee that easily? Sneering coldly, Ji Lingfeng sent another burst of sword qi toward Zhong Xian. The sword qi spanned over 200 meters, covering the entire area. That sword. Leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle? Zhong Xian was astonished. It was no wonder the other party still dared to provoke him despite having suffered a tragic defeat. It turned out that he had a top-notch Saint Intermediate tier sword that wielded strength comparable to a Leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle expert. An attack from a sword of that caliber was far more fearsome than that of the Golden Origin Cauldron. Wielding such a sword, Ji Lingfeng would be able to rival even Pavilion Master Yu in a match. Despite seeing through the other party's strength, Zhong Xian did not panic. Instead, he shook his head. If you had drawn that sword in the battle against me yesterday, I might have been put in a spot, but now. The only reason it seemed like the situation was disadvantageous to him previously was because he had been caught off guard. Once he had managed to grasp the situation, with his strength, an opponent such as Ji Lingfeng was simply too lacking. With a flick of his wrist, Zhong Xian raised his palm, and a massive palm print materialized before him. Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Palm. Boom. As soon as the sword chi collided with the palm print, it felt as if several tons of gunpowder had exploded simultaneously, and an intense shockwave blasted into the surroundings. It was fortunate that the area was protected by a grade 8 formation, or else the stone wall would have been torn down by the sheer might of the shockwave itself. Deng 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 deng. Retreating consecutively, Ji Lingfeng felt his blood flow running erratic, and his eyes turned crimson. Just a single night, and that fellow had already grown much more powerful than before. If he allowed the other party to continue growing at this pace, it would not be long before he was completely outmatched. I told you that you would die by my hands tonight, and I'll do everything to ensure it. Ji Lingfeng spat menacingly as he took out a pill and swallowed it. In an instant, his aura began surging furiously. Before long, he managed to overcome his bottleneck, reaching half-grand Dominion realm. That's a grade 8 insane demon breakthrough pill? Zhong Xian's face turned grim. The insane demon breakthrough pill was something reminiscent of a stimulant. After consumption, it had the effect of allowing a cultivator to temporarily surpass their limits. However, once the effect was over, not only would the cultivator suffer a steep decline in their cultivation, their body could suffer permanent damage as well. To go this far just to kill him, the boss of the black market sure was a tenacious fellow. But again, there was no more backing out for the boss. Just the crime of assaulting a 7-star master teacher was sufficient to bring the wrath of the master teacher pavilion upon him. If the boss allowed him to escape alive, there was no doubt that his days would be numbered. Thus, no matter the cost, since he had already made a move, he would have to see the deed through to the end. Strike not when at the bank of the river but when in the midst of crossing it. With a cold harumph, Zhong Xian waved his hand, and more than 100 puppets appeared before him. Since the boss of the black market had already made a move to kill him, he was not so magnanimous as to grant the other party the luxury of time to achieve his breakthrough before making a move. It would take some time for the other party to assimilate the medicinal properties of the pill, so this was the ideal moment to knock him down. In any case, the myriad ant hive queen had already gained full control over all the myriad ants within the grade 8 formation, so Zhao Xingmo and the others would not be able to notice a thing. Thus, there was no need for him to hesitate at all. Voila! More than 100 puppets immediately charged straight for Ji Lingfeng. When their might was combined together, they could destroy even a half-grand Dominion realm expert like Pavilion Master Yu easily. While the boss was no weakling, there was no way he would be able to withstand their onslaught. Did you think that I wouldn't be guarded against those toys of yours? Sneering coldly, Ji Lingfeng flicked his finger and tossed a formation plate into the air. While spinning in the air, a burst of mist suddenly diffused from the formation plate, shrouding the puppets within it. Zhong Xian was taken aback for a moment before his eyes slowly lit up. This is a quasi-8-star formation plate? It seems like that fellow does have quite a few good items on him. As expected of the boss of the black market, the wealth he had accumulated over the years was truly nothing to scoff at. Putting aside how valuable the insane demon breakthrough pill was, just the quasi-grade 8 formation plate was bound to be worth a huge sum, at least 1,000 concentrated high-tier spirit stone. The activation of a formation plate of this tier could trap even an expert of Pavilion Master Yu's caliber for a short period of time. That explained why the other party was so confident as to swallow the pill right in front of his eyes. In the first place, the spirits within puppets were significantly weaker compared to human spirits, thus making it harder for them to perceive their surroundings once their senses were hindered by the formation. With this single move, the other party had effectively incapacitated all his puppet. Admittedly, the method used was not too bad. If it had been any other 7-star pinnacle formation master, he would have been completely helpless before this situation. However, to Zhong Xian, such a thing could not even be called a problem. Muttering flaws in his mind, the library of Heaven's Path jolted, and a book materialized in it. Flipping it open, the flaws regarding the formation plate appeared in Zhong Xian's head. Go! Zhong Xian commanded with a raise of his hand. Hula! The next moment, more than 100 sabers charged into the mist, and amid sounds of ding-ding-dang-dang, as if slicing through certain structures, the mist swiftly receded before dissipating altogether. Formation broken. Return. With a flick of his finger, a saber swiftly brought the formation plate over to Zhongxian's hands, and with a few taps on it, Zhongxian managed to make it his. Hong Long. As swift as Zhongxian had moved, he was still inevitably delayed for several breaths. Within this period of time, Ji Lingfeng had already successfully assimilated the insane demon breakthrough pill into his body, and his cultivation had stabilized as well. At this point, Ji Lingfeng's aura had grown frighteningly fearsome, as if he had become a feral beast that would tear his claws through others. It seems like this boss of the black market has fought quite a few ring matches himself, Zhongxian thought warily. From the killing intent that Ji Lingfeng was exuding, it could be seen that he had participated in quite a few life-and-death matches in his time as well, killing many of his opponents. Otherwise, there was no way he could have emanated such an overwhelming aura of savagery. It was no wonder the other party dared make a move on him despite knowing his identity. It seemed like the blood he had on his hands had already dulled his deference for life and the master-teacher pavilion. To be able to decipher even a quasi-grade 8 formation so swiftly, you are indeed a formidable opponent. However, no matter what kind of tricks you have up your sleeves, there's no way you will be getting out of here alive. Ji Lingfeng gritted his teeth furiously. Letting loose a feral wary cry, he raised his sword and hacked it down furiously, releasing an overwhelming burst of sword chi amid powerful winds. Sila. Ji Lingfeng's strength as a half-grand Dominion Realm cultivator complemented with a leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle sword was no joke. It felt as if it would tear through space and forcefully crush one into innumerable pieces. Just this single move was sufficient to show that Ji Lingfeng's current strength was already far beyond that of Pavilion Master Yu. Even though Pavilion Master Yu was the head of a master-teacher pavilion, due to his lofty position, he was lacking in battle experience. There was no way he could compare to the boss of the black market, who had undergone multiple life-and-death battles and killed innumerable master-teachers. Without such battle experience, it was inevitable that Pavilion Master Yu's moves would be lacking in decisive sharpness and valiance, and those two factors had lowered his fighting prowess significantly. This will be difficult. A grim expression finally appeared on Zhongxian's face. You won't be useful against an opponent of this caliber. Return. With a wave of his hand, Zhongxian collected the puppets and sabers back into his storage ring. These puppets were only at leaving Aperture Realm Intermediate Stage and Advanced Stage. There was no way they would be able to stand against an opponent like Ji Lingfeng. They would only be crippled if they were kept on the field. The same went for the sabers. Release. After storing the clones and sabers, Zhongxian tapped the area before him, and a light sphere with a radius of roughly 1 meter covered him. Dan Heavenly Art of Dimension Unravel, Traverse. Sensing the danger that he was in, Zhongxian had decided to use his strongest move. 3 Kai is roughly equal to 1 meter. It's saying that metaphors an army crossing a river. It means don't attack the army before or after they have crossed the river, but when they are in the midst of crossing it for strategic reasons. In this case, it means to take advantage of the time which Ji Lingfeng needs to achieve a breakthrough to bring him down. Chapter 1277 Poison Needles. As soon as his dominion appeared, Zhongxian felt as if a sturdy armor had been formed around him, and the sense of security he felt made him heave a sigh of relief. In the next moment, the sword chi fell into the range of Zhongxian's dominion. Tzzzzzzzz. A sizzling sound reminiscent of searing metal coming into contact with ice was produced. Despite being impeded by Zhongxian's dominion, the sword chi was actually still able to edge forward bit by bit. It seems like my dominion doesn't necessarily grant me invincibility. If the strength of my opponent were to exceed my limits, the effects of my dominion will be on my opponent would be discounted. Zhongxian noted grimly. He had tested his dominion on the Golden Origin Cauldron shortly after comprehending dominion, and he had successfully halted the Golden Origin Cauldron's movement instantaneously. But thinking back, the reason why he had been able to do so might have been because the Golden Origin Cauldron's cultivation was only at leaving Aperture Realm Advanced Stage, and it didn't specialize in offense either. On the other hand, Ji Lingfeng had consumed an insane demon breakthrough pill, and he was wielding a leaving aperture realm pinnacle sword as well. In the face of such overwhelming strength, it was inevitable that the effects of Zhongxian's dominion would be limited. Nevertheless, while his sword qi might be strong enough to move in my dominion, an attack of this level won't be able to phase me at all. While Zhongxian's dominion failed to halt Ji Lingfeng's sword qi entirely, it did manage to slow and weaken it to the point where the sword qi could no longer harm him. With a cold harumph, Zhongxian flicked his palm. Voila! The slowly advancing sword qi immediately dissipated on the spot. As powerful as the other party's sword qi was, most of its energy was expended while trying to overcome the might of his dominion, such that the threat it posed was already minimal by the time it arrived before its target. You have already made your move. It should be my turn now. While saying these words, Zhongxian flitted forward. Hula! In an instant, Zhongxian traversed over 100 meters and appeared behind Ji Lingfeng's back. Clenching his fist tightly, he dealt a powerful punch forward. A torrential might that could reverse even the flow of a river burst forth for Ji Lingfeng's heart. At Zhongxian's current strength, even without utilizing the two-den heavenly art of dimension unravel, his strength was already on par to a half-grand Dominion realm expert. Pairing such strength with the Heaven's Path fist art, even Pavilion Master Yu would be hard-pressed to receive this attack. My attack didn't work. Ji Lingfeng had devoted his full strength to the previous attack, and he hadn't thought that a primordial spirit realm pinnacle cultivator like Zhongxian would actually be able to withstand his sword qi, let alone launch a counterattack shortly after that. In an instant, his face turned livid in grimness. Nevertheless, while he was taken off guard by the situation, his movements didn't stop at all. With a swift reversal of his blade, he turned his sword around and pierced it through the opening beneath his armpits. What swift reaction speed! Zhongxian was astonished. He thought that the sudden surge of strength would make Ji Lingfeng prone to carelessness. After all, the most fatal mistakes usually occur when one was certain of victory, so he was planning to catch Ji Lingfeng off guard by launching an attack right after his offense. Yet, to his surprise, Ji Lingfeng was actually able to react to his attack with nearly no delay time at all. As expected of a warrior who had fought on the ring of death, through undergoing multiple life-and-death situations, one would become more adaptable to unexpected situations, allowing one to see opportunity amidst the threat of danger. Take the current situation for example. Instead of going on the defensive, Ji Lingfeng had chosen to launch a counterattack instead. He angled his sword in a trajectory such that if Zhongxian's fist were to proceed any further, Zhongxian would first find a hole punctured into him by the sword. Excellent! Let's see who will be able to last till the very end then. Seeing Ji Lingfeng's swift and sharp reflexes, Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. In this crucial moment, he suddenly felt a surge of adrenaline rushing through his veins. All along, his opponents were either way stronger than him, or they would be defeated in a single move after having their flaws exploited. As a result, he couldn't really say that he had gone through a real life-and-death battle before. Thus, when he saw how the other party was actually able to match him in battle, he couldn't help but feel his heart leap in exhilaration. Against Ji Lingfeng's counterattack, Zhongxian decisively morphed his fist into a palm while twisting his body to advance forward. The sword should have pierced Zhongxian if he were to proceed any further, but this maneuver allowed him to move parallel to the sword, thus bypassing the sword with ease. Peng! With his sharp instincts, Ji Lingfeng also swiftly noticed that something was amiss. He quickly dashed forward to retreat, but it was already too late. Zhongxian's fingertips struck the back of Ji Lingfeng's body squarely, pumping a powerful might through his body that shattered many of his meridians simultaneously, and a spurt of blood escaped from his mouth. Nevertheless, Ji Lingfeng's forward dash wasn't completely meaningless. It had allowed him to ward off a significant portion of the might behind Zhongxian's strike, thus minimizing his injuries. At the same time, he had also managed to create some distance between the latter and him. Making use of this opportunity, he quickly turned around to launch a decisive counterattack. In the next moment, however, the scene that came into his sight made his hair stand on end. He realized that no matter how fast he moved, Zhongxian was actually able to move faster than him. The young man was like a bug firmly plastered to his back. No matter how he twisted and turned, He simply couldn't shake the young man away. His movement technique is really a drat to deal with. Left with no choice, Ji Lingfeng could only swing his sword frenziedly and form a protective barrier around him, choosing to go on the defensive for the time being to bide his time for the next opportunity to strike. Just as what Zhong Xian had guessed, he had once stood on the ring of death of the black market using another persona, and with his superior strength, he managed to rise to the position of conqueror of 100 at one point in time. It would be foolish for anyone to underestimate his fighting prowess. Even an average combat master of the same cultivation realm was no match for him. Yet, despite possessing cultivation significantly lower than his, not to mention the fact that he had even consumed the insane demon breakthrough pill for this, he found that he was still unable to claim the upper hand in the battle. How in the world could a monster like that young man before him exist in the world? I admit, you are indeed a far stronger opponent than I have thought you out to be. It won't be easy for me to kill you using ordinary means. Ji Lingfeng uttered coldly as a callous glint flashed across his eyes. In the next moment, he propelled his sword behind with his zhengqi and drove it straight toward the young man behind him. Then, making use of the time that the young man was preoccupied with his sword, he turned around and flicked his left hand powerfully. Su 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 su. Several hundred sharp needles flew forth like a raging storm. Storm needles. In order to remain the undefeated champion of the Ring of Death, on top of being strong and vicious, one must possess countless different means up one's sleeves as well. The storm needles happened to be his strongest trump card. Every single one of those narrow needles was forged of a unique material, allowing it to pierce through the skin of a half-grand Dominion realm expert. On top of that, it was also laced with lethal poison that would swiftly kill any cultivator afflicted with it. Uncountable was the number of experts who had fallen right to this move. Voila! Despite having used his hidden weapons, Ji Lingfeng didn't get careless. He swiftly rushed forward first in order to free himself from the young man's relentless pursuit before turning around to assess the situation before deciding on his next course of action. But when he turned around once more, the sight that unfolded before him made him narrow his eyes in shock. The young man had successfully halted all of the needles through a sphere of light around him, allowing him to collect all of the needles into his hands. However, perhaps out of curiosity over the needles, he picked them up and began fiddling with them. Slowly, Ji Lingfeng's shock turned into overwhelming agitation, and he exclaimed excitedly, "Ha ha ha, I never thought that you will actually court your own death." He had specially found a 7-star pinnacle poison master to concoct the poison he had laced on the needles. Even if the needle didn't pierce his opponent's skin, the poison would be able to kill his opponent just by coming into physical contact with him. Usually, there would be no cultivator who would dare to pick up the hidden weapon of another carelessly, but that fellow actually picked up his needles directly with his own hands. Was he tired of living? But instead of seeing the young man's face slowly caving into despair, the latter simply glanced over and shook his head in disappointment. "The poison you have used on the needles is too weak. You have probably been scammed. You might be able to scare others with it, but there's no way such an inferior poison is going to kill anyone." Right after saying those words, Zhong Xian intentionally pinched the tip of the needle, as if trying to prove his point. "You are able to discern the poison on the needles?" Ji Lingfeng narrowed his eyes. The lethal poison concocted by the 7-star poison master was colorless and odorless, making it impossible for any ordinary cultivator to perceive it. Yet, to be able to see through the poison just by holding it up, how did he manage to do it? "If I can't even discern such an obvious poison, I would have already died countless times over." Zhong Xian scoffed coldly. Then, with a sudden flick of his wrist, he shot the needles back at Ji Lingfeng. Woo woo. These needles were further enhanced by Zhong Xian's zhengqi, allowing them to move at a speed that seemed to be as fast as lightning. In just the blink of an eye, the needles were already right before Ji Lingfeng. Knowing that the needles were laced with poison, Ji Lingfeng didn't dare allow any of the needles to land on him. Thus, with a powerful swing, he spun the sword before him in a continuous circular motion to deflect the needles. Ding ding dang dang. As the boss of a black market in Qianchong Empire, Ji Lingfeng possessed considerable talent in swordsmanship as well. His mastery over the sword had at least reached the level of upper sword heart. Under his tight guard, All of the needles were easily deflected to the ground. If you think that you can injure me using my hidden weapons, dream on. After knocking away the storm of needles, Ji Lingfeng sneered coldly. But before he could finish his words, the vision before him abruptly blurred. Without any warning, Zhong Xian materialized right before him and raised his hand up, preparing to send a slap over. To his astonishment, it seemed like in the span of time that he was dealing with the hidden weapons, the young man had already closed in the distance between them once more. You! Livid, Ji Lingfeng quickly raised his sword, intending to counterattack. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Pa! A fiery pain consumed Ji Lingfeng's face, and he was sent flying away. A sweet sensation welled up in his throat before a spurt of fresh blood spilled from his mouth along with several teeth. The young man had used his full strength in that slap. Had it not been for the insane demon breakthrough pill that he had eaten earlier, his head might have exploded from that move. Even so, he still felt intense vertigo assaulting his head, leaving him feeling deeply disoriented for a moment. Damn you! Ji Lingfeng's body trembled uncontrollably under the impact, and he roared in frenzy. He had lived for several centuries now, and yet, he actually suffered 2 consecutive setbacks in the hands of the same person. The overwhelming feeling of shame left him so angry that he could explode on the spot. You bastard, I will rip you into pieces. Roaring angrily, the zhenqi in his body billowed as he prepared to charge forward. But before he could make a move, a derisive smile had already emerged on the lips of the young man in front of him. I advise you not to move recklessly, and also, it would be wise for you to avoid driving your zhenqi as well. Otherwise, you will only be hastening your own death. What do you mean? Seeing the fearless smile on the young man's face, Ji Lingfeng narrowed his eyes warily. I don't mean anything much. Just that when I struck you earlier, I inserted 2 needles into your cheeks. Zhong Xian replied calmly. Needles? Ji Lingfeng's body froze. It was only in this moment that he realized that there were indeed 2 additional needles on his cheeks. Due to the powerful might of the slap he had suffered earlier, he hadn't sensed the presence of the needles at all. The antidote. Swiftly withdrawing the needles, he hurriedly retrieved a pill from his storage ring and swallowed it. He had witnessed the formidable potency of the poison with his eyes. Even a leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle expert had died within 3 seconds of being afflicted with the poison. While his cultivation was currently at half-grand Dominion realm after consuming the insane demon breakthrough pill, he still wouldn't last more than 10 seconds before a poison as lethal as that. Consuming the antidote can spare you from death, but if my eyes fail me not, the side effects of the antidote will induce numbness in your body in the short run. You aren't even a match for me in your peak condition, so how do you expect to defeat me in your current state? Zhong Xian chuckled softly as he slowly made his way forward toward Ji Lingfeng. He raised his palm slowly and thrust it down lightly. Catcher! A tremendous pressure fell on Ji Lingfeng and shattered all of the bones in his body in an instant, rendering him completely helpless on the ground. The young man was right. Since he wasn't a match for the other party in his peak condition, how could he possibly defeat the other party in his current state? What other trump cards do you have? Take them all out at once. If this is all you got, don't you think that it's laughable for you to attempt to take my life? Crushing Ji Lingfeng firmly to the ground, Zhong Xian glanced down at him impassively. The both of them had crossed blows with one another back at the black market, so Ji Lingfeng should know that he had over 100 puppets and sabers in his possession. To be safe, the latter should have assumed that he would have other means in his hands as well. Yet, Ji Lingfeng still dared to attempt an assassination on him, even declaring proudly that he would claim his life. If this was all Ji Lingfeng had, a pill and a sword, he was really being a little too conceited over here. Oh, you are indeed a smart person. But smart people tend to die premature death. Spurting another mouthful of blood, savagery returned to Ji Lingfeng's face. Gathering whatever strength he had left, he flicked his wrist, and the sword in his hand flew into the stream not too far away. I have already given you the sword, so it's about time for you to fulfill the end of your bargain. The stream began billowing furiously before a massive column of water rushed into the sky, as if heralding the arrival of an unparalleled existence. Following which, an old man slowly walked out of the water column, headed toward Zhongxian. He naturally commanded a grand and imposing appearance, reminiscent of a deity. It's no wonder why Ji Lingfeng wants to kill you. You are indeed extraordinary. The old man chuckled. Then, his eyes abruptly turned cold. It's really a pity to see someone as talented as you going down prematurely, but I guess it can't be helped. Voila! With a flick of his finger, a sharp surge of sword chi whizzed toward Zhongxian. Chapter 1278 Ji Lingzhen. This surge of sword chi descended from the sky with a might almost comparable to a comet. The surrounding space froze as soon as the sword chi appeared, making it nigh impossible to avoid the attack. Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage? Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Who could have thought that the old man hiding in the stream would actually be a real Grand Dominion Realm expert, stronger than even Pavilion Master Yu himself? More importantly, his comprehension of swordsmanship is also on par with Ma Minghai, reaching half quintessence. To possess superior cultivation and exceptional mastery of swordsmanship, even normal Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage experts would find it hard to rival him. Sila. In the midst of Zhongxian's shock, the sword chi had already appeared before him, colliding with the 1-meter dominion he had constructed around him. Catcher. The sword chi sliced right through his dominion like butter, opening a small gap that allowed it to advance forward unhindered. Halt! Zhongxian swiftly concentrated the strength of his dominion to hinder the sword chi as much as it could. At the same time, he also thrust his palm forward in order to fend it off. Pang! Despite the defenses Zhongxian had put up, the tremendous might of the sword chi was still too much for him to bear. His face paled, and he was sent flying straight into a massive tree behind him. To think that even when using his full might together with his barrier, he would still be unable to withstand the other party's attack. It's no wonder why Ji Lingfeng is unable to defeat you. You actually managed to grasp the primary form of dominion. To be able to achieve this despite being only at primordial spirit realm pinnacle, your talent is really beyond my imagination. On the other hand, seeing that his slash had only injured Zhongxian, the old man in the stream remarked wintry. The coldness in his eyes deepened as he continued, all the more reason to kill you. A genius of this caliber was bound to come from a powerful lineage. Since they had already made a move, they would have to ensure that the other party was killed through and through, or else this matter would come back to haunt them in the future. They couldn't afford to take such a risk. Who are you? Struggling to his feet, Zhongxian spat through gritted teeth. Since you are already bound for death, I'll at least satisfy this little curiosity of yours. I am the Sword of Faint Warble, Ji Lingzhen, and the boss of the black market is my younger brother, Sword of Faint Whispers, Ji Lingfeng. The old man, Ji Lingzhen, said. Ji Lingzhen? Zhongxian pondered for a moment before shaking his head. He had been in Chenchong Empire for a day now, and toward those two names, he only had 4 words to say. Never heard of it. Now that your curiosity is satisfied, it's about time for me to send you off on your trip down. Ji Lingzhen spoke coldly. Unwilling to waste his breath anymore, he flicked out another sword chi with his finger. This attack was even more fearsome than the one before. As soon as the burst of sword chi was released, the entire formation began shaking, as if even the grade 8 chaotic palace beguilement formation wasn't resilient enough to withstand the might of the sword chi. If he could wield such strength without a sword in hand, how powerful would he be armed? With a face livid with graveness, Zhongxian knew that he mustn't take Ji Lingzhen's attack face on. Thus, he flicked his wrist, and a formation plate appeared in his hand. It was the very same formation plate which Ji Lingfeng had thrown out previously, but Zhongxian had managed to take it for his own. Hong Long. Instead of using it to trap Ji Lingzhen, Zhongxian used the formation to shroud himself instead, and his silhouette swiftly disappeared in the mist produced by the formation. A beguilement formation could be used to trap others, but it could also prevent the enemy from finding one in the short term. But of course, such a course of actions had its own setbacks too. Firstly, it would be much easier for the enemy to break the formation from the outside. Secondly, placing oneself in the midst of a beguilement formation was as good as trapping oneself in a cage. Even if the cage was shrouded with a cloth, A relentless barrage of attacks from the outside would still eventually wear down and destroy whatever that was on the inside. Interesting. Let me see how long you can hide for. Chuckling softly, Ji Lingzhen took a step forward and sent another burst of sword chi over. It sliced an opening through the mist easily, reminiscent of a sword cutting through mud. Astonishingly, instead of caving back in to fill up the opening, the mist actually remained firmly parted, as if there was some kind of force preventing them from converging in once more. With just one look, it was obvious that the formation plate had been ruined. Regardless of whether a formation was constructed using formation flags or a formation plate, there were two ways to overcome it. First, understanding the principles behind it and finding its flaws or life gate. Second, using brute force to destroy it. Ji Lingzhen's formation plate was only at quasi-grade 8. It could still trap leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle or half-Grand Dominion Realm cultivators, but against a true Grand Dominion Realm expert, let alone one who had comprehended half-quintessence, it was inevitable that its resilience would be lacking. A slash to overcome all means. As long as one's strength had reached a certain mark, regardless of what kind of ridiculous abilities others were to throw at one, a single slash would be able to put them right back in place. And the current Ji Lingzhen wielded such strength. Zhong Xian had many means up his sleeves, but against Ji Lingzhen, they were all sorely lacking. After slicing the mist into two, Ji Lingzhen waved his hand slightly. Catcher. The mist dissipated without a trace, and a severed formation plate fell to the ground. Without the formation to conceal him, Zhong Xian's silhouette appeared once more. In just a few breaths, the young man had changed into a fresh set of clothes. More than that, his aura seemed to have become loftier, and his eyes carried disdain from everything in the world. If one had to describe his attitude, it would be that of the indomitable conqueror of the world, peerless and unmatched by any other. If not for the identical face and soul, Ji Lingzhen would have really thought that the young man had swapped positions with someone else. No matter what means you use, there's no way you will be able to bridge the vast difference in strength between the both of us. Even if you change your clothes and disposition, it won't make a difference at all. It's all futile. Sneering coldly, Ji Lingzhen flicked another sword chi at Zhong Xian once more. Sila. The air was split apart once more, and a chilling glint whizzed swiftly across the air. He can't even deal with such trash. He sure is regressing with time. Zhong Xian shook his head in disappointment. With a swift step, his figure suddenly blurred. Woo! In the blink of an eye, he suddenly appeared in mid-air and threw a fist forward. Voila! Do you really think that you stand a chance against me? Seeing how the young man who had struggled to withstand even a single burst of sword chi from him was attempting a counterattack, Ji Lingzhen scoffed in disdain. A cold glint flashed across his eyes, and he flicked another burst of sword chi forward. That burst of sword chi clashed directly with Zhong Xian's fist, and a powerful shockwave rippled from the collision, causing the entire formation to tremble non-stop. The collision lasted for just an instant before the sword chi shattered into countless fragments and scattered the surroundings, leaving sharp gorges all over the ground. What? Astonished by the outcome of the collision, Ji Lingzhen widened his eyes in astonishment, and he unwittingly took a few steps back. Earlier, even when using a technique similar to a dominion, the young man was still unable to fend against his sword chi. Yet, just by changing his clothes, it was as if the young man had turned into a completely different person, to actually catch his sword chi with a brute punch. Furthermore, he shockingly realized that the other party's fist seemed to be even more resilient than his sword chi. I don't believe it. There's just no way a person's cultivation could grow that quickly. He must have used some kind of method. Shaking away his astonishment, Ji Lingzhen flicked his finger with greater force than before, sending forth a sword chi far stronger than before. Halfway in its movement, the sword chi abruptly divided into countless surges of sword chi that filled up the entire sky. These surges of sword chi seemed to harmonize with one another, releasing the metallic call of a sword, resembling waves in a sea. Sea of 1,000 blade. This was one of the most powerful techniques of the Sword Lagoon, and clearly, Ma Minghai wasn't the only one who had managed to comprehend this move. Sila. The sea of sword chi swiftly gushed toward Zhong Xian, and a black streak seemed to vaguely appear along the path where it passed by, as if even space was unable to withstand its stupendous might. A mere child's play. Zhong Xian sneered coldly as he took a single step forward. He raised his palm high in the sky and pressed it down powerfully. It was the same palm strike which was used against Ji Lingfeng earlier, but its might was far stronger than before. Even when faced against the sea of sword qi, it was like a swat smacking away a fly, an unquestionable suppression. Right after resolving the sea of sword qi, Zhong Xian immediately flitted forward, appearing before Ji Lingzhen in the blink of an eye. Without any hesitation, he shot a fist toward the latter's abdomen. Peng! Caught off guard, Ji Lingzhen didn't even manage to put up his defenses when a colossal might sunk into him. His lungs suffocated in that instant, and he was sent flying diagonally the ground. He tumbled along the ground many times, creating hole after hole in his wake. How can this be? This is impossible. In this moment, the severely wounded Ji Lingzhen had nothing but disbelief left inside his head. It wasn't too long ago that he wielded the absolute advantage in the battle, so how could the other party suddenly overpower him by so much in just a few moments? He wasn't just any ordinary Grand Dominion Realm primary stage cultivator, he was a genius who had comprehended half-quintessence. There was not a single person in Qianchong Empire who came close to being a match for him, yet, someone as strong as him wasn't able to receive a single punch from that young man. Was that young man really just a primordial spirit realm pinnacle cultivator? Very quickly, Ji Lingzhen's disbelief turned into rage. He had been an indomitable existence to those around him for a good part of his life, and he couldn't accept being defeated by a mere young lad so easily. Screw this. Suppressing his injuries, he pushed himself out of the pit he was in forcefully. In this moment, the elegance and grace he had when he first appeared had already turned into unkempt and fury. Screw this. The only one who is going to be screwed here is you, Zhong Xian replied coldly as his figure blurred once more. This time, the attack that Ji Lingzhen found himself faced against wasn't a punch nor a palm strike but a kick. This kick wasn't a battle technique, and there was nothing notable about it skills-wise either. However, the might it wielded was staggering, to the point where it felt as if no human could stand against it. For a moment there, Ji Lingzhen felt as if the heavens were collapsing down on him. Damn it! Damn it! Ji Lingzhen cursed furiously as he quickly drove his zhenqi furiously, sending out as many sword qi as he could. In an instant, a sphere constructed out of sword qi surrounded him. Battle technique, Great River of Swords. This was a defensive technique that served to create a spherical river of sword qi around one, neutralizing any external attacks that were to land on it. In terms of defensive ability, it could be said to be even stronger than a Dominion catcher. As soon as the kick landed on the sphere, a resounding jeer echoed deafeningly in the surroundings, seemingly threatening to burst the spherical river of sword qi. With a livid face, Ji Lingzhen gritted his teeth and infused even more sword qi into the defensive technique, attempting to sustain it. Zhong Xian's eyebrows shot up as he intensified the strength exerted by his leg. Boom! Under the swiftly growing might of the kick, the sphere eventually came to its limit and burst. Ji Lingzhen spurted a mouthful of fresh blood as he flew out once more, crashing forcefully to the ground. You actually think that you could kill me with skills like yours? You sure know how to dream. Zhong Xian slowly walked over on mid-air before stopping right above Ji Lingzhen. With his hands behind his back, he gazed sternly down on the latter, reminiscent of a peerless god of war. At this point, Ji Lingzhen's mental defenses had already collapsed. Frightened by the imposing disposition of the young man before him, he couldn't help but crawl backward in fear. The young man was simply too strong. Without using dominion or any powerful battle technique, just by sheer brute strength, the young man was able to overcome all of his means. To make things worse, the young man's body was also unbelievably resilient. Despite clashing multiple times with his sword qi, there wasn't the slightest scratch to be seen on his skin at all. At this rate, he might really just die. Just what kind of existence is this fellow? Ji Lingzhen couldn't help but feel a shred of regret. Had he known that the young man would be so powerful, he would have never agreed to help Ji Lingzhen and place himself in this mess. He thought that the other party was just an insignificant shrimp whom he could crush to death at a wave of his hand, but in the midst of his battle, he realized what he was faced against was an inviolable dragon instead. This won't do. I'll really die like this. Since that's the case, I can only give it a try then. Ji Lingzhen gritted his teeth and toughened his resolve. He swiftly rushed toward the stream before slitting his wrist with a flick of his finger. Fresh blood began spurting out wildly. Tzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. As more and more fresh blood flowed out of his body, Ji Lingzhen's face shriveled more and more, and his black hair swiftly turned snowy white. It felt as if his vitality was flowing away along with his blood, causing his rapid aging. With a feeble but indignant voice, he exclaimed, "Over the years, I have offered countless blades to you. Now, I have even tribute the sword of faint whispers, sword of faint warble, and even my own fresh blood to you. Isn't it about time for you to appear? Or are you just going to lie dormant here for your entire life?" Hong long long. The earth began shaking uncontrollably, and the water in the stream raged furiously. The chaotic palace beguilement formation shrouding this area also began to shake intensely as a result of this furious surge of power, seemingly on the verge of collapsing altogether. What's that? Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes. Chapter 1279 Movements from all fronts. The sight before him was simply too scary. Even he had to rely on the Library of Heaven's path to overcome the chaotic palace beguilement formation, and yet, just the power surging from the stream was enough to leave the formation on the verge of collapsing. Most likely, whatever that was hidden beneath the stream had already exceeded his ability to deal with. Sila. In Zhong Xian's moment of shock, a powerful sword intent suddenly burst into the sky, tearing right through the chaotic palace beguilement formation and soaring up into the sky, reminiscent of pillar of blinding light that connected the heavens with the earth. Huaji. Huaji. Along with the appearance of the ray of light, Zhong Xian felt the sword intent within him being completely suppressed, preventing him from utilizing it at all. Following which, the earth began shaking intensely, and a scarlet stone platform slowly rose from a crack in the stream. There was a sword plunged into the stone platform. Even from afar, one could already feel an unbelievably sharp sword chi harnessed within the sword, and it felt as if it was threatening to slice them into thin shreds. That is a Saint high-tier artifact. Zhong Xian's face warped in astonishment as he clenched his fists tightly. A powerful aura which could burst a hole even through the chaotic palace beguilement formation. Along with that indomitable sword intent, there could only be one possibility. The weapon before him had far surpassed the level of ordinary Saint intermediate tier artifacts, reaching the level of Saint high tier. Only a weapon of that caliber could wield the strength to overwhelm even a grade 8 formation and instill a feeling of helplessness in him. That must be the personal sword of the old sword maestro. While Zhong Xian still pondering over the matter, another identical Zhong Xian appeared with a grim look on his face. Naturally, the one who had subdued Ji Lingzhen with ease earlier was the clone, and the one who had just appeared was the real Zhong Xian. Previously, when the real Zhong Xian realized that he wouldn't be a match for Ji Lingzhen, he swiftly concealed himself within the mist and made use of the opportunity to swap places with his clone. And his clone really didn't let him down, crushing Ji Lingzhen with ease. Just that, he didn't think that Ji Lingzhen would still have another card up his sleeves. Considering how the sword was lying in the middle of the sword lagoon, the chances were that it was the personal sword which the old sword maestro had left behind. Could it be that Ji Lingzhen had successfully tamed the sword? If that was the case, they would really be in a dire position. Like I have told you, only when you have truly comprehended sword quintessence will you be qualified to make me submit to you and obtain that old man's heritage. Why are you waking me at this moment? Do my words sound like a joke to you? A crisp voice reminiscent of a bell sounded from the sword. There was a special quality to the voice that allowed it to echo even within one's soul. Saint high-tier artifacts had the ability to slay primordial spirit and erode one's mental fortitude. If one were to get careless around them, one's state of mind could very well be shaken by them. Elder, the reason why I pleaded for you to appear is to request your help in dealing with my enemy. I hope that you can help me kill that. Ji Lingzhen turned around to point at Zhong Xian, but the sight that he saw left his face freezing in shock instead. He was sure that there was only one Zhongxian earlier, so how did he split into two all of a sudden? Kill! The sword embedded in the stone platform also swiftly understood what was going on, and in the next moment, Zhongxian suddenly felt a wave of sword intent locking in place and assessing him from head to toe. He tried resisting it, but he found that he was unable to move at all. Realizing that he was completely helpless against that sword, cold sweat began dripping down his back. Why yes. It took a while before Ji Lingzhen recovered from his shock, and he hurriedly nodded in response. The items you have tribute to me over the years did help me regain consciousness. In view of your efforts, I'll grant you this favor and kill a person for you. However, you are still lacking in your mastery of swordsmanship for me to submit to you. We'll only talk about that after you have comprehended sword quintessence. After saying those words, the sword on the stone platform trembled slightly, and a powerful wave of sword intent abruptly caved in on the two Zhongxians. It felt like as long as the sword were to will it, the both of them would be killed easily. Thank you, Elder. Seeing that the sword was willing to stand up on his behalf, Ji Lingzhen heaved a huge sigh of relief. He directed a savage look at the two young men, and the deep hatred in his eyes was apparent. If not for those two fellows, he could have used the tributing of the Sword of Faint Whispers and Sword of Faint Warble to win the goodwill of the sword, and with that, he might just be able to convince the latter to hand him the heritage. But now, he could only expend the goodwill with the sword for a favor to kill that bastard. Just like this ideal opportunity for a breakthrough was blown. Just as Ji Lingzhen thought that the sword was going to make a move, the sword's doubtful voice suddenly sounded, "Which one of those two do you want me to kill?" Which one of those two? Ji Lingzhen frowned upon hearing that question. In truth, he was also deeply perplexed over this matter. Shouldn't there be only one of master-teacher Zhongxian? Why would there suddenly be two of them? Could they be twins? But even twins wouldn't have such identical appearances, dispositions, and even souls. I am the real one, he's the fake. I am the real one, he's the fake. The two Zhongxians simultaneously pointed to one another, glaring at the other indignantly. Seeing how even the movements of those two fellows were identical, as if a mirror, Ji Lingzhen fell into a daze. While such a farce was occurring within the formation, a huge commotion had broken out amidst the crowd outside. All of the sword practitioners had halted their cultivation to look at the burst of sword intent in the air, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably in agitation. That must be from the old sword maestro's personal sword. Does it mean that the heritage is about to surface? I have waited so many years just for this day. Let's go over to take a look. I must snatch over the heritage no matter who obtains it, otherwise my centuries of hard work would have gone to vain. I shall slay anyone who stands in my way of obtaining the heritage. Everyone's eyes had reddened upon seeing this sight. Some were out of agitation, some were out of envy, some were out of greed, and some were out of all three. Many of them had camped here for several centuries now, and it was not without reason why they would devote such a huge portion of their lifespan in the Sword Lagoon. Of course, a part of the reason was to advance their comprehension of swordsmanship, but more than that, they were biding their time for the day that the heritage of the old sword maestro rose from the dirt. Otherwise, even if they could refine their mastery of swordsmanship in the Sword Lagoon, they would have never wasted several centuries of their life here. The old sword maestro had stood at the very peak of Qianchong Empire. Countless opponents had challenged him, and some were even experts from the Empire Alliance, but he remained undefeated until his death. If they could obtain his heritage, they would be able to overcome their current bottleneck and reach far greater height. It must the young man who has just entered. Let's head over to take a look. Someone amidst the crowd exclaimed, and the crowd hurriedly rushed toward the area behind the stone wall. Previously, a young man had easily defeated Ma Minghai, who had comprehended the half-quintessence, and barely 10 minutes after he walked into the formation, a huge pillar of sword intent suddenly rose from within. For such a situation to occur, it could only mean that the young man had managed to free the old sword maestro's personal sword from its seal. The emergence of the old sword maestro's heritage was an opportunity of a lifetime. The young man might have displayed astounding might earlier, but just this much wouldn't deter them from fighting over the heritage. Very soon, They arrived before the formation. The structure of the chaotic palace beguilement formation had already been destroyed by the burst of sword intent from the sword earlier, putting it in a precarious situation, on the verge of shattering at any moment. It might have been difficult for them to overcome the formation in the past, but in its current state, it wouldn't be able to hinder their passageway anymore. Everyone, let's calm down and discuss a plan first. We have all witnessed that fellow's strength, and it's apparent that he's no ordinary cultivator. One-on-one, none of us will be an opponent for him. Thus, I propose that we collaborate with one another to subdue him first. An old man halted the crowd and said, "He's right. We'll only stand a chance against that fellow if we were to unite with one another." A voice of agreement swiftly sounded from the crowd. "But how do we determine the allocation of the heritage after that?" asked another member of the crowd. "We have known each other for quite some time now, so we have some understanding of what each of us is capable of. So, I say that we collaborate with one another to obtain the heritage first, and after that, we can study the heritage together," the old man suggested. "Sounds good to me." Voices of consent swiftly rippled through the crowd. The old sword maestro's heritage was bound to be incredibly profound. If they were sufficiently talented to figure it by themselves, they wouldn't have ended up sitting before the stone wall for centuries yet still be unable to take the final step forward. Besides, they also knew that if any one of them were to attempt to claim the heritage for himself, that person would never make it out of here alive. Assuming that that person really did manage to escape from their encirclement, his friends and family would also swiftly meet with the vengeance of those gathered here. Good. Let's proceed ahead then. Having successfully come to a consensus, the crowd began marching into the formation. At the same time, on the island, many young men were standing opposite to one another with wary looks in their eyes. "Sungan, we can be considered as old acquaintances with one another, so you should know that even if you are able to snatch away my jade token, you will end up sustaining severe injuries yourself as well. By then, you would be easily eliminated by other candidates too. Since that's the case, why don't we team up to eliminate the others instead?" one of the young men proposed. Standing opposite to the young man was the person whom Ma Minghai recognized as Brother Sun. Brother Sun contemplated for a moment before replying with an amiable smile, "Brother who is right. If we were to clash with one another, the victor will surely be severely wounded at the end of the battle. It's simply not worthwhile. In any case, we only have to eliminate 10 more candidates, so it would be wiser for us to team up and eliminate other candidates. There's really no need to fight this tough battle." "Very well. Let's make a master-teacher vow then. We shall work with one another to eliminate others, and we are not to turn on one another until the end of the secondary selection." Brother who said. A master-teacher vow was more of an informal promise, and it wasn't binding. Nevertheless, in view of their standing, it was unlikely that they would stoop so low as to renege on their words. "Very well." Brother Sun nodded, but halfway through his words, there was suddenly an abrupt disturbance in the spiritual energy in the surroundings. Following which, a pillar of sword intent burst into the sky. "A treasure has surfaced." The eyes of the young men gathered in the area narrowed their eyes. They were all top-notch geniuses in their own regions, and every single one of them was deeply knowledgeable. The sword intent was powerful, but it carried no hostility at all. As such, it was unlikely to be the emanated by a cultivator. Since that was the case, it was likely to be the occurrence of a phenomenon as a result of the emergence of a treasure. "I heard that Chenchong Empire has a sword lagoon, and hidden within it is an exceptionally powerful saint artifact. There was once an expert who attempted to venture into the depths of the sword lagoon to uncover the secret behind it, only to be chased away by the Chenchong Empire Master-Teacher Pavilion under the pretext that this was a heritage left behind for the populace of Chenchong Empire, so it should only be acquired by them. All along, I thought that it was only a legend, but this. Could the island we are on really be the Sword Lagoon?" Brother who exclaimed with fists tightly clenched in agitation. All of them had heard of Chenchong Empire's Sword Lagoon, but they didn't think that the secondary selection would actually be held there. More importantly, the powerful sword intent that was radiating from that blinding pillar of light was a clear sign that the treasure that had surfaced possessed extraordinary strength. Whether the legend was true or not, As long as they could obtain that treasure, their strength would surely increase by leaps and bounds. With a superior saint-tier artifact in hand, they would be able to make a name for themselves even in a place as competitive as the Sanctum of Sages. Let's head over to take a look. With irrepressible excitement on his face, Brother Who proposed. Let's not hurry into making a move first. Considering the scale of the phenomenon, everyone on the island should have noticed the emergence of the treasure by now. Given so, there's bound to be a tough fight over it. Since that's the case, why don't we make an agreement to team up first? Otherwise, with our strength, we won't have much of an advantage over others, especially against that Zhongxian. Brother Sun quickly halted the crowd and said, Zhongxian. The rules of the secondary selection prohibit the usage of puppets and weapons. That lad is just powerful for his own cultivation realm. As long as we don't suppress our cultivation, we'll surely be able to thrash him with ease. Brother Who replied casually, clearly not thinking of Zhongxian as a threat. There was an unbreachable gap between the strength of primordial spirit realm cultivators and leaving aperture realm cultivators. This was common knowledge known to all cultivators. As long as he fought with his full strength, he should be able to subdue Zhongxian easily. The rule which Zhao Shi has set is that artifacts are not to be used in any manner that contributes to the elimination of a candidate. If he were to just use his puppets to keep us at bay, preventing us from getting to the treasure, that wouldn't be against the rules. Brother Sun replied. This. Brother Who was taken aback. Thinking about it once more, Zhao Xingmo did say that artifacts weren't allowed in the elimination of other candidates. As long as Zhongxian didn't attempt to break their jade tokens with his puppets, whatever actions he made with his puppets wouldn't be considered as an infringement of the rules. What do you suggest then? Brother Who hesitated for a moment before asking. With just the strength of the few of them, they wouldn't be a match for those puppets even if they were to team up with one another. Simple. As soon as we meet Zhongxian, we should just charge forward and subdue him before he can release his puppets. With our combined strength, we should stand a pretty good chance at success, Brother Sun said as a glint flashed across his eyes. Chapter 12:85 minutes, charge forward and subdue him? Brother Who and the other young men fell into deep contemplation. With our strength, as long as we collaborate with one another, it shouldn't be too difficult for us to seal his cultivation before he can release his artifact. Once we succeed, we won't have to worry about him anymore. By then, we can just fight it out amongst ourselves to determine the allocation of the treasure. What do you say about that? Brother Sun analyzed the situation for the crowd. Zhongxian will indeed be a huge trouble to deal with if we don't strike him down promptly. As long as he remains in the race, there's no way any one of us will be able to acquire the treasure. I approve of your idea, Brother Who nodded. The others also quickly expressed their agreement to the temporary collaboration as well. All right. Since we are all agreeable to the matter, let's make a master-teacher vow. Anyone who violates our agreement shall have his reputation torn to shred. Brother Sun said. Very well. The others nodded in agreement. Very soon, everyone made their vows, and the group began making their way in the direction where the treasure had appeared. As powerful as the massive formation cast over the island was, as top-notch geniuses, it didn't take long for the group to overcome it and make their way over the stone wall. Circumventing the stone wall, they soon found themselves standing at the boundary of a land shrouded in mist. There, they found that all of the remaining 20 or so candidates were gathered in the area as well. Shall we make an agreement? Let's first obtain the treasure before fighting it out amongst us. Brother Sun swiftly raised his previous suggestion to the larger crowd. Very well. The crowd knew that a temporary teamwork with the others would boost their chances of acquiring the treasure, so they swiftly agreed to Brother Sun's idea. Regardless of which one is real and which one is fake, just kill the both of them to be safe. Lying on the ground, Ji Lingfeng exclaimed anxiously. Indeed, Elder. Please kill both of them for me. Ji Lingzhen clasped his fist to the sword and requested. Dealing with one Zhongxian had nearly cost him his life. Now that another had popped up, he wouldn't stand a chance at all without the help of the sword. Kill the both of them? Well, I guess that I can help you. However, Don't you think that you should show some sincerity in exchange? For example, another sword of the same caliber of the sword of faint warble. This. Ji Lingzhen's face twitched. Finding an ordinary Saint intermediate tier artifact in Qianchong Empire was no difficult feat, but those of the sword of faint warble's caliber only numbered a few, and they were extremely difficult to find and obtain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put himself at risk and agree to help Ji Lingfeng over his sword. Elder, you also know that swords of that caliber are extremely hard to find. If you could just give me some time, I promise you that I'll find one for you. However, that young man over there must be killed as soon as possible, or else there'll be great trouble. Ji Lingzhen hesitated for a brief moment before replying anxiously. But before he could finish his words, the young man not too far away had already interjected with a voice filled with disdain, "In the end, you are just unwilling to offer my sword to the elder." Following that, one of the Zhongxians stepped forward, and with deep indignation reflected in his eyes, he cried, "Elder, do you know why the both of them are so determined to kill me? That's because they have stolen a top-notch Saint intermediate tier sword which has been passed down through my clan over many generations from me. It's out of fear that I would alert the elders in my clan of the matter that he lured me here, intending to silence me." "You are saying that we stole your sword? Who in the world stole your sword?" "You are the one who stole my spirit stones and the annal of bedstead disquisition from me, you bastard." Not expecting those two Zhongxians to interject at this crucial moment, Ji Lingzhen and Ji Lingfeng were stunned for a moment before they lashed out furiously. "Can you get any more shameless than that? When have we stolen your sword? Don't you dare hurl false accusations at us." On the other hand, after hearing the words from the two Zhongxian, the sword on the stone platform shook its blade and sealed Ji Lingzhen and Ji Lingfeng's mouths with its sword qi. After which, it asked, "Lad, you said that Ji Lingzhen stole your sword. What tier is it?" "Elder, my sword is at half-grand Dominion realm. Even though it hasn't reached Saint High tier yet, it isn't too far from that. An elder in my clan has bestowed it to me in case I encounter any danger in my journey, and he has reminded me time and time again not to lose it." One of the Zhongxians replied anxiously, "A half-grand Dominion realm sword?" The sword in the platform harumphed coldly, and a burst of sword intent suddenly emanated from it, as if reflecting the overwhelming rage it was in. "Elder, don't listen to his nonsense. I have never taken his sword. Besides, he's just an ordinary cultivator, so how could he possibly have such a powerful sword in his possession?" Ji Lingzhen desperately explained. The spirits within weapons tended to be innocent and candid in nature. For some reason, the personal sword of the old sword maestro had an interest in collecting other high-tier swords. Thus, Ji Lingzhen brought the sword of faint whisper and sword of faint warble over, hoping to win the sword's goodwill through offering them. He thought that after several centuries of companionship, they would already be considered as friends with one another. Yet, the sword actually chose to trust the words of that young man over his. "Who are you saying is an ordinary cultivator? I am a genius of a sage clan, the Zhong clan at that. Elder, if you don't believe my words, you can check my blood." As he said those words, Zhongxian flicked a droplet of blood toward the sword lodged in the stone platform. Offspring of sage clans possess the strength of old sages in their bloodline. Through using a unique method, it's possible to draw out the sage aura in it. The sword on the stone platform mumbled as it shook its blade. Woo! Numerous surges of sword chi landed on the droplet of blood, and a slight, divine aura rippled out from it. It's very thin, to the point that it's almost negligible, but without a doubt, you do possess the bloodline of a sage clan. The sword said. This. Ji Lingzhen's body stiffened. In the information which Ji Lingfeng had provided him, Zhongxian should have just been an insignificant figure from Qingyuan Empire. When in the world did he become an offspring of a sage clan, not to mention, the powerful Zhong clan at that? If he had known that Zhongxian was related to the Zhong clan, he would have never dared to make a move on him. Elder, please don't listen to the nonsense that fellow is uttering. One must possess a very high comprehension over swordsmanship before one can possibly earn the recognition of a half-grand Dominion realm sword. However, that fellow is a saber practitioner. Even if he knows a little of swordsmanship as well, There's no way his minor understanding in the way of sword would be sufficient for him to tame such a sword. Seeing that the sword was beginning to waver, Ji Lingfeng quickly spoke up. Since neither Ji Lingzhen nor he was a match for Zhongxian, they only had the personal sword of the old sword maestro to fall back on. Their fates were dependent on the decision made by the sword. If the sword were to be beguiled by Zhongxian, they would be the ones who would die here today. Recalling their encounter with Zhongxian so far, he had shown superior proficiency in saber art, fist art, palm art, and movement art, but as for sword art it didn't seem like he knew much about it. Swords were light and agile whereas sabers were heavy and powerful. While both weapons may appear similar, they were very different in nature. Those who were proficient in the saber were not necessarily proficient in the sword too. As long as they were to bite relentlessly on this point, they should be able to convince the sword that it was impossible for Zhongxian to have a half-grand Dominion realm sword in his possession, and that Zhongxian had been lying all this while. As expected, as soon as it heard those words from Ji Lingfeng, the sword on the stone platform immediately spoke with a displeased voice. "Lad, you specialize in saber art?" For many years, sabers and swords had been in a rivaling relationship, both vying for supremacy. Naturally, the sword would be displeased to hear that Zhongxian specialized in the saber instead. "Elder, please don't listen to the lies he is spouting. I am a sword practitioner, so the weapon I specialize in is naturally the sword. My comprehension of swordsmanship has already reached the level of upper sword heart, so how can I possibly be a saber practitioner?" Zhongxian exclaimed indignantly as he tapped his finger forward. "Tz la." A surge of sword chi flew across the air, causing a cold, sharp glint to reflect onto the surroundings. From the pure sword intent, it could be deduced that Zhongxian had long reached the level of upper sword heart, just a step away from half quintessence. "You!" Arriving at the same conclusion as well, Ji Lingzhen and Ji Lingfeng were stunned. It was just a moment ago they had seen that fellow controlling over 100 Saint Low-tier sabers to deal with Ji Lingfeng's formation plate, so they assumed that he specialized in the saber. Yet, how in the world did his field of specialty turn into the sword all of a sudden? Furthermore, they realized that his sword intent was so pure that even theirs paled in comparison to it. A pure and firm sword intent. Those who don't carry true passion toward swordsmanship will never be able to comprehend such a realm, the sword on the stone platform complimented earnestly. How can this be? Ji Lingzhen and Ji Lingfeng's bodies stiffened. It was apparent from the sword's tone that it was full of approval for Zhongxian. If so, things were really bad for them. It would be nigh impossible for them to convince the sword to kill the young man. In order to become closer with the old sword maestro's personal sword, I spent the last 500 years offering treasures and artifacts to it. The wealth I have spent on it can easily number up to several 10,000 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. On top of that, my comprehension of swordsmanship has reached half quintessence as well. Yet, after so many years, not once have I ever received its recognition. How could that fellow receive the sword's compliment despite only being at upper sword heart? Ji Lingzhen couldn't accept the situation. Taming a high-tier sword was somewhat similar to taming a beast. Continuous and steady effort was required for the high-tier sword to accept one. In order to get close the old sword maestro's personal sword, he had gone to great lengths, but never once did he receive the other party's compliment. On the other hand, Zhongxian had only spoken a few words, but the sword was already full for compliments for him. When did the sword become so understanding? If the sword had been so understanding from the start, he wouldn't have failed to make any progress despite centuries of effort. Wait a moment. That fellow is using demonic tunes and impartation of heaven's will. Ji Lingfeng hurriedly sent a telepathic message over to Ji Lingzhen. He could tell that there was a unique quality to the other party's voice that seemed to put one in a trance. If not for that, the sword would have never believed Zhongxian so easily. That bastard. Ji Lingzhen also swiftly realized the same after Ji Lingfeng had pointed it out, and his gaze swiftly turned cold. "Elder, please don't fall for his deception." Ji Lingzhen anxiously stepped forward and persuaded. However, Zhongxian swiftly shot him a piercing glance and bellowed, "Silence." After which, he turned his sight back to the sword and explained, "Elder, The main reason why those two men want to kill me is because I have fully grasped the conception behind the old sword maestro's sword character, and my comprehension of swordsmanship is also about to reach sword quintessence. They feared that I would overtake them. That's why they have been wanting to suppress me for a long time now. You have fully grasped the sword character. The sword on the stone platform trembled intensely upon hearing those words, and it hurriedly asked on. Of course. Zhongxian nodded proudly. All in all, the character harnesses a total of 107 sword arts. On the surface, the sword arts appear to be individual of one another, and some of them were conflicting even, but this is also where the wisdom of the old sword maestro lies. He has managed to combine all 107 sword arts together to create a new sword art. Elder, may I know if my analysis is right? The sword on the platform shook in agitation as it gestured on. Continue. While the sword art doesn't manifest itself in the sword character, I am still able to deduce a part of it. Most likely, it would have a grand air so as to allow it to harness and control any sword art within it. If I'm not mistaken, the final sword art that the old sword maestro has formed out of the 107 sword arts should be a type of sword formation, and in order to activate it, we would need your strength, Elder, Zhongxian said. The scribblings on the stone tablet outside contained the knowledge of experts over many generations. While their interpretation was erroneous on a whole, there were bits and pieces of truth in each of them, and through the library of Heaven's Path, he was able to derive out the most accurate cultivation method to the sword arts. After which, with his deep understanding of swordsmanship, it wasn't too hard for him to deduce a little ahead. You're right. The sword on the stone tablet replied as it assessed the young man before it once more. The more it looked at the young man, the more satisfying he became to it. To be able to deduce this much from just the sword character itself, the young man's talent was really frighteningly high. If Ji Lingzhen could comprehend so much back then, it might have already submitted to him and became his weapon. You said that you were about to reach sword quintessence. May I know how long will it take? 10 years, 50 years, or 100 years? The sword asked in agitation. The young man already managed to achieve a complete grasp of the character which the old sword maestro had left behind. As long as he achieved sword quintessence, he would be able to meet the requirements for the old sword maestro's heritage. I don't need that much time. At which, Zhongxian closed his eyes before continuing, just give me a moment. 5 minutes would do. The formation refers to the huge formation that causes one to walk in loops. Zhongxian faced it while he was attempting to find Zhong Zhouxiao. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.